fund department organization budget presentation. We're going to take the general administration, which includes city council, city clerk, city manager, city attorney, human resources, and finance. We'll let that slide presentation go, those speakers speak, and then we'll go around to us and start asking questions of the various departments. And then the other departments we'll take one by one. City manager.
Okay, welcome back, Mayor, staff, and any members of the public. So, consistent with what the mayor said, why don't I begin? So, we will share our screen and begin the slideshow. So, I'll go over the city council. That's why my name is up there, but this is the city council's budget. There are virtually no changes to the city council's budget. There are 5 part-time members, our 5 city council members. The next slide, really quick. We have some accomplishments listed and strategic initiatives. This is sort of a placeholder for this PowerPoint that's similar to what was mentioned last year. If we go forward to the next slide, I'll just talk about your expenditures and revenues. The revenues for the city council's department is supported $65,000 from the general fund. The rest comes from the water fund, the wastewater fund, the stormwater fund, the cable fund, and solid waste. And because you are our governing body, your cost is spread out over all of the funds. When we look at detail at the expenditures, there's no change in the salary line item. There's a $360 increase in the benefit item, and that is for health and insurance benefit cost increases. There's a decrease on supplies and materials, $1,000, and that reflects moving the focus from the city council budget just to the city manager's budget, because that's where that publication will be regenerated and started and led from. There's a increase in the training and meetings line item. So there was year $12,700. There's a increase of $2,500 in that line item that funds all of the meetings, attend and furtherance of your governance of the organization. $2,500 increase is a increase for League of California Cities conference this year. We put that in as a placeholder, knowing that some members of the council may go, and the fact that we have an election this year. If there is have the available funds for that council member onboarding.
I'm sorry, Javon. We're getting some feedback, so if mics can be muted, please.
Okay. So overall, in expenditures, however, the budget is down by $6,500. And that is the city council's budget. Melissa, do you want to go over the city clerk's budget?
Sorry, I had a comment.
Can we get through the administration? We're going to take them all, like I said, all the general fund, the council, the clerk, the manager, the attorney.
Gotcha, sorry.
And then we'll have questions at the end.
Hi. Okay. If you could go ahead. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so before you is the city clerk's department. We have 2 full-time employees, myself and a deputy city clerk. This is a high overview of some of the functions that we do, the slide before you. And these are all in support to the city council and the city in general. And if you could go to the next slide. So this past year, the accomplishments, I'll just briefly talk about some of them. We did implement software for the California Fair Political Practices Commission, the FPPC, with a vendor called NetFile to allow us to have our Form 700 filers electronically file their statements, their annual statements. And we will be bringing an ordinance soon to allow for campaigns for candidates to be able to electronically file their forms for their candidacies as well. We hosted a voting center for elections in November of last year, as well as March 2020. And the voting centers in San Bruno were at the San Bruno Senior Center, San Bruno City Hall, and at Skyline College. And those were very successful, and we still hold the highest number of walk-in voters of any city in the peninsula. We completed successful recruitments for some of our commissions, boards, and committees for those vacancies, and we still have vacancies and openings on several commissions that we are accepting applications for, as well as our Citizens Revenue Oversight Committee. We are still gathering applications for that process so that council can approve a board for that body. And we held community-wide events to bring awareness to the city clerk's office, as well as election-related materials through Operation Clean Sweep and the Beautification Task Force, as well as Community Day in the Park. And the strategic initiatives this year is a little bare because of COVID and the budget restrictions. We're not trying to go too far out of reach. We want to keep things kind of as minimal as possible to allow for the budget to not increase in any way. So this year, my main goal is just to get through November 2020. With all of the COVID issues happening, we do expect this to be a very large election. Of course, it's a presidential election. With the political climate the way it is, nationally, it will be a big one. And we are expecting major turnout for November 2020. This was expected even before COVID. And now the state of California has moved to an all vote by mail. It's typically been held per county, which counties are vote by mail only. San Mateo County has been an all vote by mail county since 2015. But this year, the entire state is doing it. And so it's going to be brand new for a lot of residents in California to vote by mail. There's a lot of confusion about the process. And our office is getting calls from people that don't even live in this county asking. So we're focusing a lot on elections this year, and especially just getting through the November 2020 election. And locally, we do have a mayor seat open and 2 council member seats. And we may have some ballot measures moving forward. Next slide, please. And before you is a slide detailing our budget. We
lost you, Melissa.
Okay, it looks like we lost Melissa, so let me just pick up. As far as salaries in the department, only significant change there really is from fringe benefits. The professional service line item went up by $12,000 to support record retention, electronic filing of a number of the forms that are required. And additional notices budget went up from $4,500 to $10,000. I believe that is related to additional notices that have to go out around the election and meetings. I do not see right now the elections expense. Oh, I'm sorry. It is here. It's down under other charges. That has a reduced budget by $71,000. So the budget in the current fiscal year was $261,000. It is projected to be $190,000. It's lower based on county election expense costs. And if Melissa was on, she could opine more. But I think that's also related to, because it is going to be a big election year, the election costs has a larger base to spread over. And so it will be projected to be $71,000 cheaper. Melissa, if you're on, feel free to pop back. Okay. without that, Mayor, is it okay if I go through the city manager's budget and then we can do a pause there?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the city manager's office, there are 4 FTEs in that department. Myself, our assistant city manager, that also has the responsibility of supervising our HR department. The city council and staff will remember a few years back, the HR director position was defunded and HR was given to the assistant city manager. The prior assistant city manager also supervised IT. That has now been moved to the City Net Services Department, and that transition has gone well. The other 2 positions are a assistant to the city manager that at this point currently serves as the administrative assistant to the city manager's office because there is a 1 vacant position, and that position is for a public information officer that is remaining in the budget with the goal to underfill that, but then bring in a administrative support to support the office. We have what the city manager does on the screen. Management and oversight of the municipal corporation, support the city council and their formation of policies, community outreach, which frankly has been boosted right now due to COVID-19, and as a part of our organization where we really need to take a global step up. And so we will be planning that as a major improvement post-COVID. City Council, strategic planning and policy development, external organizational relations that hold 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Next slide. Some major accomplishments that are up, continued leadership on our Bay Hill specific plan and Mills Park, and in general other development and economic development opportunities in partnership with Darcy, our Community and Economic Development Director. Really implementation of the first phase of our comprehensive fiscal stability project that had a number of positive outcomes that I will recap. Worked with the senior leadership team and the council on our strategic initiatives, currently ongoing leadership during COVID-19. Support a whole host of other initiatives from the wildfire assessment to downtown parking, lot rehab, Crystal Springs, etc. A little bit more on COVID. We can go to the next slide. Some strategic initiatives going forward are develop an annual program to really support and report out on the City Council's priority focus areas and strategic initiatives. Pursue parking management strategies for downtown and our residential neighborhoods. Oversee planning for the new Recreation and Aquatic Center. Develop long-term strategies to address the fiscal impacts of COVID-19, and then support City Council onboarding transition, potential ballot measures for 2019, as well as a whole host of other things that are listed on pages 75 through 79 of the budget book and captured in the City Council Strategic Initiative document. So as far as budget, similar to the City Council, the revenue for the City Manager's office comes from the general fund, but is also spread out over our water, wastewater, stormwater, cable, and solid waste fund. As far as the expenditures changes, there is a $24,000 budgeted salary savings due to vacancies projected to still occur during 2021. There is $14,000 of increased fringe benefit costs, both health insurance and pension. Increased copying cost of $3,000, and then we removed $150,000 from the budget, which was a one-time allocation that the City Council will remember was to support the fiscal sustainability project and the efforts with Godby Research, Lou Edwards, and other studies. So part of that money has been expended. The other amount is being encumbered for continued support with the fiscal sustainability efforts. And then why don't we pause there? We have two other sort of general administrative units the city attorney and HR, but we can pause here and take any questions.
Okay, I thought we were going to go through them all, but that's not a problem. Laura, well, I'm sorry?
It's up to you. I'm sorry. If you want us to go through them, we're happy to.
Well, why don't we at least get, there's not a lot of slides. Why don't we get through maybe the city attorney and HR, and then we'll pause. So we don't go too much, then we'll go department by department.
Up to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for just taking a couple of minutes of time. Can everybody hear me and also see the screen?
Yes.
Fabulous. So thank you. If we could just pause on that slide for a moment. So I'm going to help all of you and members of the public who might be viewing answer three basic questions. What does the city attorney's office do? How does that work align with city council priorities? And since you're at a budget study session, how much does it all cost? So let's take a second and talk a little bit about what the city attorney's office does. And you'll see some of those things in this slide. But basically, the city attorney's office is responsible for all legal matters associated with the city. And so that means that I manage all litigation that's filed by or against the city. I provide advice to all city departments, including all of the enterprise funds as well, regarding any legal issues that come up. And there are many of them on a daily, if not minute by minute basis, especially after COVID-19. And finally, I assist in meeting all of the city council's established priorities. So I want to just take a minute while we're pausing on this slide to just talk briefly about what those are. So I previously provided all of you with a summary of those priorities and a detailed list of work associated with those. But for purposes of today, just a very short summary of those things. First priority was to implement the transit corridors plan. That's one of the 7 city council adopted priorities. And as you know, we've been working steadily on a variety of development projects to support that initiative, and as well manage to avoid litigation on a number of other development projects that have already come to the city. There's improvements in community facilities and infrastructure. The city manager and the finance director talked extensively about that. And that's work that I do very closely with Public Works Department and Community Development. A good example of that is the Recreation and Aquatic Center, which has taken a great deal of time from all of those departments, including the City Attorney's Department, to push that over the finish line at the recent Planning Commission meeting. The third priority established by the City Council is to grow revenues. And most people think of the City Attorney's Department as only a department that spends money, not that recovers money. But in fact, we've worked very diligently to make sure that we can recover money, not only if the city has been harmed in some way, but also for revenue purposes. And of course, the best example of that is the money that we have assisted other departments, including the city manager's department, to recover from PG&E, which amounted to an initial $6 million for ex-parte violations, plus $3 million for the Crestmore Wildfire Mitigation Fund, plus an additional $1 million for additional ex-parte violations. We're very pleased with all of those outcomes, and it wouldn't have been possible without collaboration from a number of different departments. The fourth priority is to create community connections. And so I do assist with communications and website posts that go out. And one example of that was around the cell tower, or the small cell ordinances. I worked with Darcy's department and also Public Works in making sure that that information was legally appropriate and didn't create any problems for the city. It turns out it did not, which was great. Fifth priority focus area is community aesthetics and safety. Well, one thing that most people do know about is code enforcement, which we do assist with when requested. We've been successful in a receivership on one particularly difficult property, and a number of other abatement warrants for city properties that are private properties that are in quite a bit of distress. One thing that a lot of people don't know about is the city attorney's sort of continuing work with the police department in making sure that individuals who have identified mental health disorders or not otherwise qualified to own weapons, that those weapons are removed and destroyed by court order. So we do that every year. We handle probably 10 to a dozen of those petitions every year. Number 6 priority focus area was planning for the future. And how do we do that? Well, one main reason that you've seen as recently as last night is the adoption of amendments to the municipal code. And so we're almost done with chapter 5 and be moving forward to amend or propose amendments to the remaining chapters in the coming year. And then finally, to support organizational health and employee success. And I work very closely with the Human Resources Department and the City Manager's Office to make sure that that employee rights are not only recognized, but also making sure that the city's interests are protected. And we've been successful in doing so and avoiding many of the difficult employment matters that seem to plague other cities on the peninsula. So if we could go to the next slide. This is just a very short list of some of the accomplishments and strategic initiatives. We've already gone over all that. And so really the last question, next slide please, is how much does it all cost? And the answer is that we have, myself and my legal secretary, 1.75 FTE, because Lupita, my legal secretary's time, 0.25 of that time is allocated to workers' compensation claims. So we accomplish those things with 1.75 FTE. And then as you also know, in addition to that, 5% of my total compensation, meaning the city attorney's total compensation, is reimbursed to the city by the foundation. And they're doing that because I spent approximately 5% of my time providing legal advice to the foundation board and to the director of the foundation around their programs and initiatives. So what that all adds up to is about $550,000. It's about 0.3% of the $180 million all fund balance, and it's about 1% of the general fund budget. And that does include all outside counsel, with the exception of defense counsel for tort claims, and that's covered under a different section of the budget called self-insurance. And I think there's probably a slide on that a little bit later. So there are no major changes at all proposed for this year. A slight reduction in expenditures that you see, or in the general fund subsidy, which reflects, a change in the, you don't see it on this slide, but in the detail slides, it shows a reduction in salary for the concessions that the finance director has baked into the budget. So I don't have any other comments. I think that's the last slide, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Human Resources.
Okay, HR also under the city manager's office. If we go to the next slide, HR has 2.5 FTEs. That is the HR manager and 1.5 FTEs of management analysts. Our HR shop here is a centralized HR division responsible for the full gamut of HR, which can typically be broken down at a high level from recruitment, classification, labor relations, and employee training and development. Fourth item being benefits administration. So you have 2.5 people in the HR division, supported by and overseen by the assistant city manager. They're also in charge of all of our employee appreciation events. They work with and support the personnel board, and we leverage training resources with a county-wide consortium of agencies that put on training that are really funded by all the cities, the 21 cities plus the county And they're also in charge of risk management and workers' compensation with support from the city attorney's office. Accomplishments, successfully accomplished over 30 recruitments and onboarded 16 full-time employees, supported our labor negotiations, expanded our annual health fair, administered anti-harassment training to all employees. Again, strategic initiatives include supporting our collective bargaining group, reviewing and revising our administrative regulations and procedures related to personnel, reviewing job descriptions and taking those through the appropriate changes with the personnel board, and we've seen a number of those, and working on workers' compensation issues, researching options for administrators to advance or enhance our claims and cost management. And we talked about that with the City Council with a number of recent workers' comp claims. As far as expenditures, total general fund expenditures for the department are $675,000 projected for 2021. Revenues for the department are $271,000. That again, when we say revenues, it is made up of charges from other funds, water, wastewater, stormwater, cable, and solid waste. The general fund subsidy or contribution to the department is just under $400,000, and very little changes in the projected expenditures. The major item is an increase of $73,000 to support our labor negotiation efforts this year, continued negotiating with the two bargaining groups that remain open, and then preparing for all of our bargaining groups to be open at the end of this calendar year. And so that total professional services line item increased from $65,000 to $138,000, with a few, actually one notable decrease of $3,000 in training and conferences, and a slight increase in tuition reimbursement of $6,000 to reflect our employees' use of the MOU's tuition reimbursement program. So that's our HR department. And so that concludes the overview of our administrative functions, minus the finance department that we will go through after questions on what has been presented.
Correct. We got to leave Keith his own space here. So why don't we go to questions, and then we'll go down to the rest. We're going to first start with Laura, go to Marty, go to Linda, go to Michael, and then myself. Laura.
So I'll start with City Council. Is there any way, we're asking all the departments to cut back, but yet I don't see that City Council is doing that. Is there any way that we can cut back on, I guess, training meetings and conferences? For example, League of California was canceled, maybe rescheduled. I really think it's important that a new council member, I know Linda, you attended that in Sacramento. I think that's an important conference for a new council member, but, I think one of the things when you have difficult times, trainings and conferences are things that you kind of cut back on and don't attend, or if you want to attend, can you do it out of your own pocket? So I'd be interested if other council members are interested in trying to do some savings on that area, as well as, we have all the dinners have been canceled because of COVID. So I don't see those starting up anytime soon for that as well. My city clerk, I had a question regarding, Javon, I think, is Melissa back on? Because I really wanted to get a better understanding of the 5,500s.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. So I guess there was an increase in professional services. We got that. So the 12,000, I understand that. It's an important thing for retention, record retention. But then we had an increase of public notices from 4,500 to 10,000, so an additional 5,500.
Yes, so the reason why we did that is because the city clerk's office pays for our account, I should say, pays for the legal advertisements, the public notices that go to the newspaper for city council meetings. Those come when we have a public hearing, and if there's any zoning ordinances that go before council, we need to advertise those in the paper too. And we do expect with the municipal code update cleanup that Mark is doing, we do expect extra noticing on that end, as well as some of the big projects for community development that may come forward next year. And we want to make sure that we have enough money. This year we had a bit of an overage in that account, and we tried to assume how many projects will be going that will require noticing, and this was the figure that we came to that would provide us with enough money to be able to pay it without having to face any more overages.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very good details on that. And then I guess my next, Javon, I think we talked to you enough. And we've provided you some good feedback, and I don't really have a lot of comments and don't want to go through that. And Mark, I think the same as you. So thank you for your presentations and your detailed accomplishments in the binder. And then for HR, just trying to understand. So I was thinking that we'd see some sort of a savings from the 1920 budget with not having no assistant city manager from January to June.
That's in the city manager's department.
Okay.
There were significant salary savings there that we utilized for covering the current year deficit. I mean, it was, I know it was over 100K, but.
Okay. Okay. And thank you.
Thank you. Marty?
Yes, thank you. If we can look at page 61, for those that are following.
I'm going to be on there. Okay, we have that up on open here.
So my question is, when we are determining the general admin recovery from other funds, how is that calculated?
Okay, so there's a cost allocation factor that underlies all of this, and so I'll have our finance director articulate that.
1 second, Councilmember Bruno, I'm just sharing the screen here.
There we go.
Slide 61. Okay, this is
Perfect.
the city council operating budget. So the question is, how are the recoveries calculated from these other funds? So the city has what's called a cost allocation plan, and what that plan does is it allocates the cost of the general administrative support service department, like the city council, like the finance department, like the city manager, across the departments that it actually supports. And so because the city council or the finance department supports the water fund, the wastewater fund, the stormwater fund through different functions, there's an allocation methodology based on a number of factors, including the FTE count, the position counts within the department, or the total expenditure budget within those departments as well. And so it allocates out those administrative costs across those departments, recognizes the cost that way. And so for the administrative departments, it's recognized as a revenue recovery in that department.
Okay, and as we're waiting for this cost allocation plan to be completed, are these funds being redetermined on whether the costs are appropriate?
So the cost allocation plan, the methodology of the plan will likely change slightly because that is the first and one of the critical components of the user fee study. However, the cost allocation, the dollars that get allocated out is updated annually during the annual budget process. So what you have here and what's presented in the 2021 budget is an annual update that staff produces when we prepare the budget. And so we might see some minor changes in the methodology when we complete the user fee study, but it might not, I don't expect that it will be significantly different.
Okay, perhaps at another time you could just show me the mathematics behind that. I don't need that right now, just to be satisfy a curiosity buzz of mine. Going to page 63. Oops. I'm just curious, what are the special projects that are in this budget?
Give us a second to pull that up.
Councilmember Medina, the special projects that make up the $8,500 budget number, it includes 3 items. The first is an item for $3,000 for departmental and employee recognition. The next item is $3,000 for the Narita Sister City activities that may occur during the fiscal year. And then the third item is for $2,500 for the city, that gives the city council an opportunity to recognize volunteers during the year.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you for that. As Councilmember Davis mentioned, I would be, I believe it, I'm willing to figure out how we could reduce something in our budget as an example of following through on how we could, how it really is going to take everybody to give, and taking out of the council budget would seem appropriate. I have a question regarding how, when the city attorney's office wins a case and is awarded some money, does any of that fund get returned to these various accounts for reimbursement, or does that money go back into the general fund?
So I can start an answer to that, and the financial details I can ask the finance director to do. So the situations in which the city files a claim against somebody else and recovers money are not very common, but they are mostly relating to situations where some third party has damaged city property. And I think you've seen the report on that, where the city does collect that money plus a 15% overhead charge from the responsible party. And it's my understanding that those funds, as well as any other recoveries, go into the general fund. But I'll let the finance director take the rest of that if he has any more detail.
Mark, I have actually nothing to add to that. I think that's absolutely correct.
And my last question is also within the Human Resources Department, when if there's more work being done for recruitments in one department or the other, is the amount of time for those recruitments kind of charged back to the appropriate department?
Councilmember Medina, I'll take that question. So the way that the HR department expenses are allocated out based on our cost allocation plan, it is, at this time, it's not dependent on the number of recruitments for a particular department. It's really based on the methodology that we've used, which is more on an FTE count per department. And the thought on that is that the number of recruitments sort of ebbs and flows depending on what year you might be in for a particular department. And so in the long term, it will likely even itself out.
Understood. It's just pretty interesting to see as we have all these different accounts and how the details of this machine work. So is there any thought of how any funds recovered from the police department could pay for these various departments that we covered, because we have water, wastewater, storm, cable, and solid. It just seems like, you know, a certain number of is it applicable to charge from those accounts, the other accounts?
Councilmember Dean, are you referring to the asset forfeiture account in the police department in particular?
The asset forfeiture would be one of them. I'm surprised the solid waste is so small in comparison. We do spend, I'm just curious. I haven't looked at as much detail this year until this year. So I'm just have the opportunity to get an answer. So here it is. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, the asset forfeiture fund has very strict federal requirements as to what those funds are to be used for. And the Chief Johansson can elaborate more if I'm not able to articulate, but those funds cannot supplant. They cannot basically switch out funding that's used for existing things. It's primarily used for the enhancement of services that the police department and public safety is able to provide to the community. And a couple of examples that staff are currently proposing to use that funding for, it has potential to be used for a radio replacement project. We're using that money in the asset forfeiture fund to implement a CIP project in the police department for their ergonomic dispatch center upgrade. Those are some very discrete projects that is an applicable funding source for those funds to be used for. It's not appropriate to use that funding for like HR services, for example.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marty. Linda, do you have questions on the general admin?
I did. So I would like to go also to 61, page 61. I just want to ask, just specifically around the cable fund, is the cost increasing just because of the benefits associated with the salaries? Are we having more meetings, or I mean, what's the? I'm trying to figure out the rationale.
Looks like the costs are increasing across all the enterprise funds that are supported by the city council, and so it's a proportional increase for all of those enterprise funds. And so there is no individual increase specific for the city net services.
And is that the 25,000? Is that because of the Channel 1, the live meetings?
Again, it's not specific to any one function of that department. Again, the cost allocation plan spreads the cost of the city council's department budget across all of the departments that it supports. That includes the enterprise departments listed here, as well as the general fund departments that it supports, like planning and building or community services. And so it's a straight allocation spread of expense based on FTE count.
Right. And Linda, I think another part to your question is, these are charges to support the council's budget, but included within the expenditures for the city council's budget is not a line item or a series of line items that support the cost of city council meetings. For example, the city clerk supports city council meetings, but that's in the city clerk's budget. Facilities supports the city council meetings, and that's in the facilities budget. And all of the work that IT does to support the city council meetings is in the IT budget. And so this is really a budget to support the core cost of the council, not all of the meetings.
Okay. Okay, and then the 63, the dues and memberships. I do echo Councilmember Davis's comments that everybody else is cutting. Maybe we should look at what we can cut, and I'd be curious to know. I actually don't know what exactly I've been signed up for, to be honest, as far as dues and memberships go. And maybe we don't all need to be part of all the same organizations. Maybe that's a measure that could help a little bit. It may not be a whole lot, but it's listed here as $42,600.
Councilmember Mason, I have the itemized list of dues and memberships here, if I may.
Yep.
$11,000 for membership in the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG. Mm-hmm. There's $16,000 to participate in the League of California Cities organization. There's $14,000 for the Heart of San Mateo County organization. There's only $100 for the Peninsula Division of the League of Cities. I believe it's an annual membership. And then finally, there's a $1,500 line item for the San Mateo County Airport Roundtable. Those items make up the $42,600 line item.
Okay, and are any of those mandatory?
Let me just so these are the regional bodies, and some of them are facilitated by population or for Emergency Services Council, for example, which is somewhere else. So, Linda, like the SFO airport, is it mandatory? The answer would be no. You'd be withdrawing from that organization and not being a part of the group. But yeah, so these user memberships are not like us getting subscription magazines, newspapers, or all 5 of us belonging to the Bay Area quality of something. It's for the city to be represented at that body, and they're due, shall we say?
But are the memberships that is the city membership, for example, $11,000, or is it $11,000 made up of all 5 of us being part of it?
That's the city's membership in ABAG.
Right.
Okay.
The whole.
Okay, so it sounds like there's no cost cutting there.
I'm sorry, Linda.
Is there any cost cutting there? Are any of those memberships individual memberships that you just read?
We'll go back and we will provide that information to you guys.
Okay, great.
For both that line item and the meeting conferences, we'll provide you guys the we'll give you the detail on all of them, and then we can have that conversation at one of our subsequent meetings.
Okay, great. And then on page 69. I just want to make sure. So there's no transcribing going on, right? I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. That there's nothing on that line.
Go down one more.
Page 69, you said, Councilmember Mason?
It's right there. Go down a little bit. So it's under number of meeting minutes transcribed.
No, I mean there are 60 meeting minutes that are transcribed. Oh, that's a double. It's what is it? A return. So that one line item reads number of meeting minutes transcribed, and so there are 60. There, imagine 4 columns.
Okay. So I would say just for semantics, the minute this was just in the Daily Journal actually in South City, but transcription services are quite expensive, and normally it's word for word. Which is not really what we're getting. I'm not asking for that, but I just want to make sure it's clear that the meeting minutes are not really being transcribed in the official sense. Number of bid openings, and I'm sorry, let me go back to that 1 minute. The meeting minutes that are being transcribed by the city clerk's office, from my understanding, are the city council minutes. And
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melissa. And Melissa, were there any others that were being transcribed by your office from any committees or commissions?
No, the committees and commissions have staff liaisons that manage the minutes for those bodies.
Okay. And then what does the number of bid openings conducted mean?
The city clerk's office conducts bid openings for various departments, most notably Public Works. When they have sent a project out to bid and they set a date and a time for those bids to be received, the city clerk's office will officially open those in a public setting at City Hall, usually in front of those that submitted the bids, the contractors and vendors.
Okay, and then are you also tasked with the noticing of those and the collection of those, or just the openings?
We just do the openings. For the most part, the departments that have bid openings manage their own advertisements for those.
Okay, and then the number of notarial acts. I'm glad to see that that there's notaries in house. Statement of economic interest. I did just want to know. I know some organizations, they have their Form 700s from employees filled out with HR and some with their clerks. And in San Bruno, are you handling the Form 700s for all the employees as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then for the city attorney's office, Mark, on page 87, is the requests and subpoenas tied to the number of contracts reviewed also, similar to the transcription question?
No, I think if I understand your question, the number of public records requests we receive and the number of subpoenas we receive is independent of the number of contracts reviewed.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and then the number of contracts reviewed, is your office the one handling the, I guess, I don't know if I'd use the word accountability, but who's reviewing the contracts on a regular basis to ensure that all of that the parties are adhering to their provisions? Is that procurement or is that the city attorney's office?
So I think if I understand your question correctly, I think you're talking about compliance with the contract terms.
Correct.
And generally the department that is in charge of that contract is the one that is determining whether the contract terms are being adhered to. So what the city attorney's office does is approves the contracts as to form, make sure that the contracts that are presented have the appropriate designation of a business license and also the appropriate insurance that complies with the requirements of the contract. And there sometimes occurs a series of negotiations because vendors may want to change provisions of the contract. So we would assist the department in doing that only where it's appropriate. But compliance with contract terms is something that is the first responsibility of the contracting department.
Okay, great. And then I just wanted to, I guess, end just with a comment around the city manager's office. I did want to commend City Manager Grogan, because one thing that is not really highlighted here that I think is really, I mean, there's talks of recruitment in the binder that we got, but I think that what I have seen since I got elected has been that a lot of these positions, so starting with planning, which was vacant when I was a planning commissioner, fire, police, now park and rec, and the deputy city attorney, which were all vacant since I was elected, puts a significant amount of time and pressure and work on the city manager, who is then ultimately responsible for every department in the city. So I just want to take a moment to really commend the city manager, because I think a lot of the work that's being done is really laying a foundation that isn't in existence right now. And it's a lot of work, and it's a lot more work when you don't have the senior staff there helping you every step of the way. So I know we're going to go on, but I know it's a tough budget season, but I just want to take a moment to really thank Javon, because I think that what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish here is no small task, and especially when you don't have the department heads in place. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Michael?
I think what Linda just said is spot on. Yeah, and definitely, I know the city's been operating with the skeleton crew for a long time. So I agree with Linda. Javon, a lot of credit goes to you and to your staff, because I know that the load gets shared, but you guys are doing an amazing job. I don't have too many questions, but I agree with Laura's point around as a council, we do need to lead by example. So if there's anything that we can squeeze out of our portion of it, the dues and memberships, all of those organizations that we participate in, I do believe we get a lot of benefit. I've been doing a lot of the online training and the conferences that are offered through the League of Cities. And so I know that because we are members, I was able to do those for free. So I do believe there is some benefit to us there, and plus just the advocacy and support that we get from them. But perhaps under the training and conferences, I believe could all be optional. I think there is value in new electeds attending the orientation, but I don't think anyone who's been on the council for a while should be attending that. Probably anything else should be eliminated. And I'm also wondering what the possibility is of the council suspending salaries for a year. Combined with salaries and benefits, we could almost fund an FTE position. So I don't know if that's something that the municipal code mandates that the council has to receive a salary, but if that's a potential save, I know I'd be willing to forego salary for at least a year, and then future councils can decide what they want to do. The technology portion, I know we had significant savings in our budget when we stopped printing the council packets. They're generally huge, and we've been getting them electronically. But I don't see a corresponding line item for the iPads that were purchased. And I know that there was enough iPads purchased for the council. I returned mine because I didn't feel I needed it. I believe other council members may have returned theirs. There was also a cellular subscription that goes along with those iPads. And there are box accounts that were created to support that process. But I don't see a line item for that. And I'm wondering if that is captured somewhere else under general IT and not under our budget?
Councilmember Salazar, if I may, I believe that the iPads or the data service plans for the city council devices were previously under the communications line. That's account 6450, but because those accounts the costs are smaller, and we're showing this budget versus budget comparison, you don't see it. In that line, we have cellular, a line item for cellular services for $728, and then a data plan for 5 tablets if if each council member does desire a tablet, and that line item is $1,800. So that's what we currently budget in case all 5 desire an iPad.
Yeah, and we can look at that and pull a little bit out. One of the things we wanted to make sure that we have enough to provide you guys, because we're doing so many remote meetings, and a lot of what you do is subject to Public Records Act, is that, for example, if a council member needed a device, so they could have a device that for all of their city business that is subject to the Public Records Act, we wanted to have enough to provide you guys with that. And so if it's not used, it will create a minor $200 salary savings at the end of the year.
Right. Well, I mean, the devices that were purchased weren't cheap devices, and I think that the cellular subscriptions end up being significant as well if we're not using them. So I don't know. I mean, again, if we're looking for places to cut, if most of the time when we are using the devices, we're near Wi-Fi and we don't need the cellular subscription, that's something that could probably at this point be canceled. I don't think we're under a contract from that original purchase. So again, just throwing out some ideas on where we might be able to trim a little bit in our own budget. And regarding the election, so, you know, we're projecting a lower cost, and my question around that is that cost really just driven then by what we decide to put on a ballot, or are there costs that come to us based on the county's decision on how many polling places that we have? What does that cost cover?
That cost covers our municipal elections. So we do have a minimal cost for our vote centers, but it's pretty low because they actually pay us for our building attendance and things, the use of the room. So even though we have a small cost, it's usually recouped in the fee that they give us right back for having to pay for staff. But for the election itself, it's for the municipal elections held per city. So the way that we obtain these figures is I ask a quote of Mark Church in his office. He is the elections official for San Mateo County. And his office will give us a quote based on how many council seats we have running that November or that election, as well as how many ballot measures. And I usually ask, what if we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ballot measures? And then he provides a quote, his office provides a quote as requested for those different figures. And we have kind of, working with Keith's office, we've just kind of put a ballpark in here of what we expect we may need for this November's election, just like the number was different for last November.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Michael. My questions, I'll start with HR and move forward. Under 6401, which is page 97, it's professional services. Obviously, you've already touched on it, was up 73,200. That's the most significant jump, and I understand that there's a lot of contracts up, but in my years here, that seems to be the most significant jump I have seen, even with a lot of contracts off years on years. So is that just to be a safe number? Is that because the expectation, anticipation of that much of an increase? I mean, that's a large increase that I've never seen like that.
Well, understand that this year you will have all of the bargaining groups open in 1 year.
I've been there, but we've done that before, yes.
As well as you still have two bargaining groups that have expired contracts. And so there's money in there for both negotiations and if there is a impasse process or a mediation process to pay those services. And so it is a significant increase. We believe it's warranted for projected costs. Again, if we do not expend those costs, we will not, and it will create a savings. What we wanted to do was project enough funds should there be prolonged negotiations where we're not going back during a financial challenging time asking for additional allocation of dollars for negotiations for this line item sort of mid-year or during the process.
Okay. Moving forward, city clerk's office, I think I found out it was regarding professional services. It was at 12,000. However, it used to also be on line item 6702. This is on page 71. So therefore, I think it's a separation of that is my understanding. So I think I've answered my question, but I just, in case I was wrong.
Correct. That's correct.
Thank you. Going up to city council, I've heard what my colleagues have said. You know, one thing, the dues and memberships, I think it's good. Linda Brighton agrees with the point, but I think it's good for all of us. It used to be more detailed, and I'll speak on that when we go into finance. But the dues and memberships, like ABAG, for example, Linda, it's for the city's representation as a whole community, not as if I dropped off, would that save us $100 or something? So it's quantified in that, but it's still good for that information to be known. I was going to make some suggestions on possible modifications. When we talked about conferences, for example, last year I chose not to go to the Progress Seminar because of the labor issue that they were having. Even though they had a reprieve for a weekend, I still didn't feel that met the mark for me to attend. And I know I had signed up for April, which has been postponed till October, if that's going to happen. I know that in all good conscience, as in 0809, I refused and I did not go to those, canceled because of, that could be $1,200. We usually allocate 3 persons to go. And I know Marty, Linda, and I had signed up for April. It is postponed till October, and it may not even happen. But my first suggestion would be that if we feel that it is of value for us to go to Sonoma for the weekend, that we pay for it ourselves. And then there's no questions asked. But I have a hard time with our staff and everybody else feeling that, and then I'm up there. If I'm paying for it, but again, like I said, no questions asked. I think also when we talk about community promotions, I think it was also committee, commission, and board recognition on every other year as well. So, maybe that can be done in a different manner that it saves something as well. We had put up to training, meeting, conferences of an increase of 2,500. Maybe we can see that go down, which would save 2,500 if we don't go to Progress or we pay for it ourselves, or at least half. I think we could find some cost savings. Then Michael, of course, brought up the cellular, which I appreciate. But I do think it is important for us to be mindful, and I think it matters that we do lead by example. And I think that's it for me for right now. Thank you, Javon, Melissa, Mark. And we'll move on to finance with Mr. DiMartini. Mr. DiMartini, before we turn the floor over to you, I just wanted to say to you and to the entire finance team that when you and Javon came here, we used to be doing the budget a different way. I remember being asked, you've been here a while, are you okay with change? Because I guess people know that I'm not when it comes to the budget sometimes. But it was for efficiency and effectiveness, and it saved a lot of staff time in that. And so it is not as intricately detailed. However, we can always get those documents, but it saves time, effort, paper, and staff hours. So I want to thank you. In addition to you and this finance team have also received an award, a continued award through our audit, but also an award for the first time that we had never received in the city. And then I also want to convey to you and to the finance team, I hope on behalf of the council, that we appreciate all of the effort and hours that you have worked, your team, to put this together. In this challenging year, it made it that much more difficult. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Mayor Medina, thank you very much for your kind words. I greatly appreciate that, and so do the finance team. So let's jump into what the finance department does. So we have 10 full-time positions, including myself, and we are responsible for all of the financial, administrative, and purchasing functions for the entire city. That second box on top really sort of summarizes what I consider to be the focus of our department, which is maximizing our revenues, reducing and controlling our costs, and supporting the increased efficiencies that we can gain as an organization so that we can do our business better. We constantly are reviewing our internal control structure to make sure that our transactions are done with the highest amount of accountability as possible. We produce the comprehensive annual financial report. It's better known as the CAFR. There's a ton of work that goes into putting that document together. Our office is responsible for coordinating and preparing the annual budget that's before you today, and the long-range financial planning and analyses and strategies that are involved in that process as well. We also support the utility billing function for water and wastewater and garbage. We also manage the city's business license program. We also process any annual rate reviews that might occur with those programs. As far as purchasing, we are responsible for all the purchasing activities for the city as well. That includes the establishment of purchase orders with our vendors, any accounts payable, making sure all of our invoices for our vendors get paid on time and in compliance with the contracts and the purchase order, any accounts receivable for billings that we send out, and any grant management for any of the number of grants that the city receives. We also make sure that payroll is processed every other week and complies with all of the federal and state and legal requirements. And then we also manage the city's banking relationship with our banks and our investments that we invest, as well as our debt program as well. Some accomplishments of the finance department last fiscal year. We did continue working on an ongoing risk assessment of the financial administrative policies and procedures that the city has. Last year, we successfully implemented a new cash handling policy, as well as a revised purchasing policy. And this year, we continued our efforts and with City Council's approval, implemented a new investment policy that broadened the investment opportunities for the city, as well as increased some controls and reporting as well. We issued a CAFR with no material weaknesses, with adequate internal controls. We completed the annual garbage rate review that was before council last evening. We've also continuing to work on our business license audit program, and we have completed the transient occupancy tax audit. Those were audits that had not been conducted in quite some time, and we made a great deal of progress in those audits. Prepared the budget, and then we also did a lot of work in supporting the council's efforts and directive to staff on the successful passage of Measure G before the voters back in November. Some strategic initiatives that the finance department is working on. We spent a great deal of time on the strategic direction with council on the fiscal sustainability project, particularly on the revenue enhancements. I mentioned Measure G. We worked on the development impact fee program. The main project this year will continue to be the hopeful conclusion to the user fee study, working on continual long-range financial forecasting refinement, working with the IT and department and all other departments on a strategic software needs assessment to make sure that our back office applications are effective and also have some front office, customer facing portal functionality would be great in the near term future. Continuing to improve our internal controls over many important processes around payroll and purchasing and billing. And then also developing some long-term strategies to address the fiscal impacts to the city related to COVID, much of which, as we talked about last night. Overall, the finance department's budget is actually going down year over year, and that's primarily due to the removal of the one-time audit service consulting fees that were included in a prior fiscal year budget. So those one-time budget items are going away. So we're back down to more of a baseline budget. You'll see the departmental revenues of the recovery similar to the other admin departments. Ours is a little bit higher in finance because we have dedicated customer service staff at the front counter in City Hall that are almost solely dedicated to the utility billing function. So those are supporting the water and the wastewater enterprises more heavily. But just in full transparency, there are a number of analytical projects that our staff want to assist departments on making progress on. Some things like the short-term rental program, or potentially reviewing cannabis, or the fee study, or parking meters. There's a number of things that our staff could support. And without additional analytical support that we've talked about, it's very challenging for us to add as much value as we would like to. And then also, there are system challenges that we have. Many of our systems don't talk to each other, and doing some advanced analytical reporting out of our systems is challenging on a daily basis. And so it makes our life a little bit more challenging in that regard. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Is there any hands for my colleagues? Marty.
Yes. Thank you, Keith. Can you give us a summary of the audits for the business licenses and the hotel tax? Very brief.
Yes, I'd be happy to. So starting with the business license tax, that is an ongoing audit that will take a number of months to complete. And it's been a bit delayed, obviously, because of COVID and the shift of focus. And so that audit program is primarily focused on our audit consultants researching business activity that is being conducted in the city of San Bruno, where that business currently does not have a business license. And so they're making contact with these businesses. They are working with them to get them into compliance, whereas our staff in the finance department is more focused on ensuring that businesses that are currently compliant, that currently have a business license, continue to stay in good standing. And so the audit services complement the services of city staff currently. The transient occupancy tax audit has been concluded. All 12 hotels were audited last year. They concluded at the beginning of this current calendar year. And audit finding letters were sent to all of them. We are still working with the hotels on confirming the audit findings, and we'll be able to report back to council as to the final results of the audit in short order. Again, that has been delayed, related to COVID.
Great. One last question. The status of the user fee study, I just don't recall writing that down. So I apologize if you told us before. When would it be due? Or when is it projected to be completed?
So at this time, we don't have a tentative date where we will come back to council for the staff's proposal on the fee study. There was a fairly detailed study session that occurred with council a few months ago. And soon after the budget is adopted, we hope to basically put the final touches on the fee study. There's a number of things that need to be reviewed, primarily in the building division and in community services for recreation fees. And once that analysis has been concluded, we'll be able to come back to council for an update.
Right. I can expand on that. One of the things that council asked in a previous meeting is, can we, knowing that there's work to be done to do the entire policy setting conversation around the fee study, can one of the first things we do is update our fees where we charge out our employee costs. and that we can front load and bring back to the city council in a more expedited basis than the full sort of policy setting conversation around how much will we subsidize our various programs, recreation, aquatics, etc. We can bring a true up, so we at least have charges for our employee costs that represent the fully loaded cost of those positions in a more expedited manner again after we conclude the budget.
Thank you for the update.
Any other questions from my colleagues? I'm not seeing any other hands up. Going once?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Laura and then Linda.
Okay. So number one, I would just say that, prior to Keith, you're coming on board. Oh, sorry, I lost my headset. Prior to Keith coming on board, we didn't have a finance director that was full time, and I know you walked into sort of a backlog. We were just barely scratching the surface, and I realize that one person can't get it all done, but the accomplishment that you've made since you've been on board with your team is to be commended. There are other things that I know you want to do and you will continue to do and work on, but unfortunately COVID has probably derailed a lot of that. So I wanted to first thank you and the staff for that. I think it's also important to mention that I really appreciated your report on the performance and workload measures. I think that was a really valuable, and you've got a goal, you set it, and very clearly defined what your team will be successful at. And I guess thank you for all those that supported the Measure G, the presentations that you did this past year. And it's smaller groups, larger groups, presentation to the city council. You're well prepared, very knowledgeable. And what I think is important that what you did in that presentation is before we're going to go out to the public and we're going to ask to increase taxes, here's what we're doing internally. We're cleaning up, we're reviewing, we're trying to maximize. And that, as you said, is continuing to be ongoing. You're going to, as you said early on, you want to maximize your revenues, you want to reduce your costs, and of course, support and increase your efficiency. So that is continued what you continue to do. And that's all I have to say.
Linda.
Yeah, just a question on the other services, the line 6419, page 109. You could just break that down, or let us know how, I guess, what that's made up of.
You can't see it. I see it. Mason, 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so the other services line, account 6419, is made up of 3 items. There's an item for some safekeeping charges that we have to pay for our bank in regards to any transactions we have with investments. We also do incur a very modest amount of bank fees and charges, which is pretty standard for any banking institution that a municipality has. So we incur an annual amount of fees. And then we also pay for an armored car service that on a daily basis comes to City Hall and picks up cash to deposit to the bank.
How much does that cost, the armored car service?
The armored car service costs $5,740 a year. We've minimized the need for that because we are pushing people to pay their utility bills online with a credit card. And we've also instituted a remote service deposit function at the counter, which basically means we can deposit checks by running them through a scanner like you would at a teller with our staff right here. And it allows for the deposit to occur quicker. The money gets in our bank, we earn more interest, and we can discard the check. So our need for armored car service has been declining over the past 2 years.
Okay. And then just the division of duties for procurements, is there a financial cutoff where departments handle their own procurements? Because Joanne mentioned earlier that one of these positions, I think it was the building maintenance person, they would have to get 3 quotes for whatever project they have. But as an example, at what point does finance get involved and then and actually facilitate and coordinate the procurement of a good or service?
Sure. So finance is involved at a couple different steps of the procurement process. First with the establishment of the budget is really the first step of the procurement process. Without an appropriate budget, then staff can't spend against it. Then finance comes back into play when it's time to issue a purchase order. So once there's a commitment to pay a vendor for a service, we issue a purchase order. And depending on the dollar amount, it might require my approval and also the city manager's approval. And then once the service is rendered or the materials have been delivered to the city, it goes through an invoice payment process. We have to pay our vendor. The invoices start with the department, and again, depending on the dollar amount of the purchase, it will again trigger up to have myself be an approval or the city manager as well. But on any given transaction, there is at least 2 approvals, at least. So we do have adequate internal controls for pretty much every transaction that gets processed.
And you put those in place, Keith? I think if I remember correctly, that was your team that put those in place, or they were already in existence?
The city's purchasing policy had not been updated in quite some time. When upon my arrival, working with Javon and city staff, we basically modernized the purchasing policy to have standard approval thresholds. We tried to automate a number of processes, make it easier for invoices to get paid, reduce the amount of paper, just make it more transparent and accountable. But the dollar thresholds were in existence with the original policy, but we just enhanced them.
If I can, Linda, let me add on to that, because I think at the core of this question and a prior one you asked is about our procurement process. And San Bruno has what's called a decentralized procurement process, meaning that the departments do all of their own procurement, no matter the dollar threshold. Now, everything Keith said is true. There are internal controls, finance processes for setting up the invoice, the budgetary approval, the PO, there's signatures. Everything Mark said is true. There is the city attorney's review, the city manager sign off on all contracts. But our procurement model is a decentralized one, which is different than other larger organizations. It's different than Berkeley or San Francisco that has purchasing divisions or purchasing units that have the primary responsibility for procuring large contracts and doing that contract administration. In our system, that is held decentralized, and each department is responsible for their own procurement with the appropriate internal controls and budgetary monitoring.
And then, so, I'm asking all these questions around division of duties, so I can, as I look at the salaries and who's in which department, where the needs are. But if that's the case, then, and it's decentralized, then not everyone's going to be an expert in procurement roles, right? Which are their own, I think they're their own niche area. So does that mean that Mark, our city attorney, is also reviewing the procurements before they're issued, or who's making sure that we're complying with all the regs around procurement?
Right. So that happens at the department level. Okay. So with the decentralized model, the responsibility for managing that contract and all of the terms of that contract happens at the department level. The approval process and the essential effectuation of that contract goes through a number of reviews, and people have certain roles that they play. Finance has roles in the budgetary approval, the purchase order, ensuring that there's available cash in the line item that they're going to charge the contract to. Mark has a role of reviewing insurance certificates, the contract for legal conformance. I have a role in approving every invoice that goes out, making sure that it was actually tied to a PO and there were the appropriate signatures. I also have a role in signing every contract, ensuring that that the finance department signed off for theirs, Mark did his review, going in the system, making sure, okay, that's a big dollar amount. was that approved by council and things of that nature. So we all have our individual roles, but for example, the recology contract is managed in the finance department. And so all of those terms for that contract are within the finance department.
Yeah, and sorry I was not more clear. I actually am talking about the actual process to procure the contract. So the notice that goes out to the public to say that there's an RFP, the preparation of the RFP, the number of days it needs to be published depending on how much it is. Does it need to be published in different newspapers? Those kinds of rules. Who monitors that, or is there like a FAQ for department heads? Because that takes a lot of time.
It does. So that is the centralized by our departments, and is done. There's some role for the city clerk when she went over her department and their bid openings. They have a role in that, but the central process is managed by our departments, which is why when you have units that, like building maintenance, that only has staff that do the work and supervise the work, and you don't have anyone to do that contract management process and managing and planning the work, that work doesn't get done.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, just by way of further explanation from Councilmember Mason. So all of that is absolutely correct. I think there's another piece of it, which is that before the departments engage in a procurement, either for a contract that's required to be bid or professional services, if there are questions about that contract, they'll come to me, to the city attorney's office, to say, what about this or what about that? And over the years, we have developed a set of standard contract templates for an entire variety of services that the city procures. So for example, we have a template for professional services, we have one for general services, we have several templates for contracts depending upon their complexity. So the departments know to use those templates, and do use those templates for every procurement, unless there's some particular, minor modification that might need to be made. So with respect to their particular subject matter expertise, for example, I wouldn't get involved in, how many inches of paving are going to be on the street. Jimmy's department does that. But in terms of the general contract provisions, those have all been previously established and are part of contract templates that the departments all use.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for those answers. Very helpful.
You bet.
Michael, did you have anything?
Just wanted to thank Keith for all the work he's been doing. Been doing a fantastic job, and you're going to have a huge job ahead of you in the coming year. And just glad you're on board and leading us through this. So just thank you, and thanks to your department for all the work you've done. And Rico, just as a point of order, I'm wondering, I was looking through the slide, and it's 2:30 now. We were supposed to be at our break at 2:30, and it seems like there's a lot of material still to cover. So I just kind of wanted to get a pulse on, are we going to be able to get all through the rest of the material, and should we perhaps maybe go a little lighter on the questions going forward?
I would think, personally on the questions, I think they should be succinct to the budget and keep to that, so we can try to minimize that if we can. And that's what I was going to check. With 2:30, we were supposed to take a break. I was going to ask Chief Johansson whether he wants to present before or after the break.
I will leave that completely up to you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good now. I'm good to wait.
Okay. So, Siobhan, with that said, and I know because we were supposed to be at 2:30 with the break and then moving on to enterprise funds. So with council's approval, why don't we go to the police chief, Brian Johansson. We'll take our break and then come back and then go to fire. Chief.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Good afternoon. I will try to be relatively brief in terms of the slides in order to leave adequate time for you all to ask questions that you might have about police operations. But by way of the slides, I'll give you a quick overview of what your police department does and what we're looking at for this fiscal year in terms of budget. We are 72 full-time employees. Obviously, our primary focus is to preserve community peace and really to provide for the quality of life that we've come to expect as residents and those who work and play and travel through our city. Our most fundamental function in providing that service, of course, is patrol. This is the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of the police department. These are the folks that are on the street 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, making sure that not only are we responding to emergency calls for service and taking proper reports and conducting investigations, but sort of the unseen and difficult to measure side of police work that we would call proactive police work that your particular agency here in San Bruno is very much known for throughout the county. And it is difficult to quantify the impact that has on safety and on the quality of life in our community. But I can assure you, as a law enforcement professional and expert, that it is substantial. And it is something that we take very seriously in terms of how we utilize our available time when not responding to calls to attempt to ferret out criminal activity before it actually occurs. Of course, we also take on the responsibility for traffic and parking safety. Parking obviously has been a hotbed issue for quite some time in the city, and I'm sure that there will continue to be questions about that. It is an area of focus for us as an organization and for me personally as a leader of the organization, and we will continue to improve through implementing new technologies and better utilizing staff, becoming more efficient, more effective. However, traffic is often overlooked, and actually, as you look at Office of Traffic Safety rankings for our city, we do have a traffic safety problem. We tend to rank very high in those particular evaluations as to the level of danger, so to speak, of traveling on roadways in San Bruno. And this is not something that we've put a tremendous amount of resources into in the past. I mention it here because City Manager Grogan spoke earlier about some of the budget balancing measures being implemented at the police department, and one of those would include, potentially include, taking our one motor or traffic police officer and moving him into patrol, which will further impact our ability to focus on traffic. By contrast, most cities with similar problems and similar size to us will have at least 4 full-time motor officers. And we had 2 when I first started with your police department over 14 years ago, and we've had 1 for the foreseeable past or for the recent past. We also have investigations and support services. Investigations is our investigative bureau or our detective bureau. This consists currently of 2 full-time detective sergeants, a detective corporal, a straight detective, and then also we've got an Artichoke Joe's cardroom detective that works out of there, out of that investigations bureau as well. And these folks are responsible for taking the more sophisticated or complex investigations to the next levels. We do a lot of investigation at the patrol level that in a larger organization would be reserved to detectives. As an example, I started with the San Diego Police Department, and if you were in patrol and had a shooting or a stabbing or some other serious violent crime, at the patrol level, you'd put up yellow tape and wait for detectives. And in San Bruno, that's simply not the case. Your patrol officers are going to be conducting those initial interviews in those major crime scenes, processing evidence, even authoring search warrants and doing things that in much bigger cities are reserved for detectives. But the detectives in our department, that is largely where they're focused as well. So they spend a great deal of time writing warrants, following up, going deeper on cases to try to make sure that all of the potential leads are exhausted. Support services essentially consists of currently a support services sergeant, although as you guys saw yesterday in the council meeting agenda, that there is going to be a slight shift in that, and that position will be converted into that of a captain. But support services primarily is that support services officer, who the many services that he provides are all important, but the most important one probably is the homeless outreach and intervention and working with Life Moves. That's what compromises a great deal of that support services officer's time. You've also got administration, which is, as we move through this transition, will consist of myself as the chief of police, 2 captains, 1 overseeing each of the divisions of the police department, and 2 lieutenants, both assigned to field services and patrol to provide adequate second-level management and supervision of our patrol force. We also manage our own records and dispatch services. This is a really valuable component of your police department. Having in-house dispatch services not only increases the expediency with which we can respond to our public, but it also provides a great deal of additional safety for our responding officers because they have truly a lifeline right here at home in San Bruno that they're dealing with day to day in responding to calls. And not to overlook there the records division, which in today's day and age has a tremendous amount of responsibility. The amount of compliance that we have to go through to make sure that we're reporting everything we're required to report on as a law enforcement entity, and to make sure we're responsive to Public Records Act requests and video retention and all kinds of responsibilities. Those are all handled by our records division. Beyond that, we will be bringing in code enforcement, as was discussed a little bit yesterday. I think this is an excellent move for the city, and I think very conducive to sort of force multiplying and putting folks in the same camp that can work together towards common goals. So that's an overview of your police department. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Some of the accomplishments we listed, and I know these are much more extensive in your document, so I'll breeze through them. But we supported the pilot program for residential parking permits. This was a long-standing issue the city had been working very hard over a long period of time to take on, and there are essential police enforcement and management components that are pieced into that. And so it was a very significant goal of this past fiscal year, and something that I think we're pretty proud of working with other city departments to accomplish. We also implemented this public information and warning campaign involving the enforcement of blocking sidewalk parking and wrong way parking. I won't belabor that. I think you guys are all very well versed as to what was involved in that, but it was a pretty significant undertaking for a department of our size to suddenly, after many, many years of not enforcing these violations, to begin enforcing them in the interests of public safety, and yet make sure that we did the public outreach first to sort of soften the blow. We participate in all kinds of community-oriented policing events, as anyone who follows us on social media is well aware. Those have unfortunately come to a bit of a grinding halt here with COVID-19, but I would expect them to pick back up in the near future, and we will continue to be very involved in events like Coffee with a Cop and the Mad Walk and Special Olympics events. And the next slide, please. Some other accomplishments is we've been really focused on getting all of our staff through the Crisis Intervention Training Academy that's provided in our county. And this is difficult because every police department has this same goal. This is really important as we respond to more and more emotionally disturbed individuals on different calls. And we learn so much about the delicacy with which those incidents need to be handled, not only to protect the city from liability, but to protect the individuals who are in crisis. This academy training is invaluable, but spots are somewhat limited. So we got 9 through there. We actually will focus on reaching out to other counties in this next year in order to make sure that all of our incoming and new staff that have not yet been through this training can get through it, regardless of the limitation on seats within our own county. And then also pushing folks through de-escalation training. We were fortunate enough to get 3 of our own staff members certified as de-escalation instructors. And so that removes some of the cost associated with providing the state-mandated ongoing de-escalation training. Which obviously it speaks for itself, but is designed to stop incidents from escalating to use of force incidents whenever possible. We deployed a document management system this year as well, which is really important. Legislation is becoming one of the biggest issues facing law enforcement day to day, week to week, year to year. It seems that new laws pass as fast as we can possibly keep up with them, and those new laws put really big requirements on your police department, and they tend to have short turnaround times. So this particular requirement took a bunch of documents and training records and things of that sort that have always been in-house and private unless ordered to be released pursuant to court motions, and required us to make them publicly available without them being requested. And you know the way that your police department runs, we don't have someone who can just take on that task. So we spent some time assessing possible vendor partners, not as an outsource, but as a software that we could teach our own staff to use that would seamlessly allow us to comply with this law and meet the January 1, 2020 deadline date, which we did. And so we are now compliant, and we are in fact learning that we can expand this document management system to do lots of other things that have been needs of the police department for quite some time. And likely that will span over to other city departments that have online document management needs as well. I'm really proud of the certification of 3 staff members as mindfulness peer coaches. This was a particular passion of mine. I think that we are moving away from the conventional peer support model that, typically the way that police departments respond to some of the stress and crises that we deal with in the job is that we wait for them to happen and then we try to put Band-Aids on the trauma. And what we're learning is that it's more important to be prepared ahead of time. We're focused more on resiliency and preparedness and making sure all of our staff have the tools in their box to cope with the things that they're going to see throughout a career in law enforcement. And this mindfulness for law enforcement course was a really, really big part of that. So the previous year, we got our entire staff through the 2.5-day intensive to expose them to the concepts of mindfulness and trauma management. And then this year we certified 3 of our staff members as coaches so that we can provide the system on an ongoing basis internally without any external costs. We also secured the certifications to deploy an unmanned aircraft system. This is basically a drone program. There's a lot of hoops to jump through because we're in restricted airspace in San Bruno right along the airport. And so a couple of staff members in particular who already had full plates took it upon themselves to go through the process of obtaining what are called COAs to ensure that when we are prepared to, we will be able to run a joint drone program with the fire department for all kinds of rescues and safety procedures. And we're pretty excited about the possibility of that. And then, of course, we've implemented best practices for staff protection related to COVID-19. This was another really big undertaking. For the whole city, it was big. But for a police department that never took a single day off as this whole thing started and knew that we needed to continue going to calls and being out in the public and interacting with all manner of people without the ability to confirm their health beforehand, we really had to move super fast to implement systems that could protect staff. And I'll not say that we've succeeded in that because I know that we're not out of the woods yet, but I think we've done an exceptional job of keeping staff healthy while maintaining service levels in our community. Next slide, please. We also completed an after-action report for the Tan Fran shooting incident, a little bit of a laborious task, but something that had countywide and statewide interest. And we delivered, I actually personally delivered active shooter response training at both the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference and the California Police Chiefs Association Conference based on the previous YouTube active shooter incident and the Tan Fran incident, both of which obviously occurred in our jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So strategic initiatives moving forward, we will continue to enhance traffic safety and prevent impaired driving. This primarily attaches itself to an Office of Traffic Safety grant that we apply for each year, and we were successful in obtaining again this year. It puts a little over $70,000 of overtime money on the streets to do a better job of enforcing all manner of traffic safety issues and to focus on reducing impaired driving. We will continue to work to expand our services to homeless in an effort to secure permanent housing. This has to do with continuing to work closely with Life Moves, which has been extended, fortunately, into the next year. And so we are learning every day about how to streamline our processes for getting folks into the services, connected with the services they need, and we'll continue to focus in those areas. We are replacing the Police Department Public Safety radio infrastructure. This I will not bore you with details on, because I'm uneducated and will not give you the right words or answers, but I do know this is very important from a technical standpoint. Our radio system is literally our lifeline, and it is exceedingly outdated, and so needed to be updated, and we are doing so now. We also have an initiative to secure a public safety incident command vehicle. I think you're mostly aware of how that has come through a generous donation from Google YouTube and through the Community Foundation, and we are actually in the building process for that product now. Deploying an employee wellness and resiliency program, I think I already spoke to that, near and dear to my heart. We will continue and hopefully finalize that this year. We want to increase SMC alert registration. That'll be easy using our existing social media channels to push more people to SMC alert. And we will expand use of that document management system, again, to store more and more documents on the cloud and remove, the expense associated with all the records we currently store physically at the police department, and B, the danger associated with that in terms of, flood, fire, just about anything could wipe that out fairly quickly. Next slide. We're also completing that upgrade of the public safety communications infrastructure that the city manager spoke of earlier. We are funding that now completely out of equitable sharing funds, which I'm happy to answer questions about. I know there are a number of questions as we move forward here. Implementing daily training bulletins within our RIMS system. This is a system that requires officers to complete daily review and quiz on our essential policies and procedures, just to ensure that they're up to speed with what's changing, because they're changing every day. Enhancing our parking enforcement capabilities. This has a whole bunch of different branches, but suffice it to say, I'm very much focused on technology and leveraging technologies to become more efficient, more effective, as well as looking at how we can better engage patrol forces in our parking enforcement efforts, and getting, most importantly, perhaps up to full staffing in our existing parking enforcement division to stand up proper enforcement procedures. We're working on this restructuring of the department command staff. This will be very, very important to the long-term health of our organization, both in terms of our operational structure and in terms of our succession planning and getting folks ready to step into new positions as we have retirements and resignations over the years. We'll continue working to expand our Reserve, Explorer, and Ride-Along programs. Reserves and Explorers is because they're great feeder programs into patrol. And we get a chance to kind of test out whether folks are a good fit for our organization before we have to actually put them out on the street. And I apologize, but I'm having a little bit, there we go, computer's back up, sorry. And we will continue to provide our PSAs. We've been doing, I think, a pretty good job of the social media thing, but we need to expand how much of it we're doing, at least in Spanish. And there should be other languages as well. We have moved forward with certifying one of our Spanish-speaking officers as a PIO. That's the first step in beginning to do more and more actually in Spanish, not just relying on the end user to go through translation services. And given the segment, the significant segment of our population that's primarily Spanish-speaking, I see this as being very, very important and relatively easy to accomplish. Next slide, please. So in terms of the police budget, I think that the document that you all have already reviewed has much more expansive information. So I'll not go through all these numbers here. I'll leave it to your questions. Suffice it to say, we have taken some great pains to help balance the budget, knowing that we are the largest drain on the general fund. I think we have accordingly stepped up and done just about everything we think we can at this point to contribute to balancing our budget. The biggest thing we're doing is that we are holding 8 positions vacant. And I will talk a little bit before I turn it over to questions about some of the impacts of these budget balancing measures that you can expect, because I'm sure that would be a question on your mind. But in addition to freezing these 8 positions, 4 of which are patrol level police positions, we will transfer code enforcement over to the police department. This should provide all kinds of newfound efficiencies and effectiveness in being more responsive to code enforcement complaints. We are doing our, here it's listed as reclassifying the police sergeant, but this is really the reorg of the entire command staff, which not only provides some flat out salary savings, but will better align us with the way the organization is built in the first place. Of course, like everyone else, we're dealing with health and pension increases, and as the biggest department in the city, we probably hit the city the hardest when it comes to those changes. We're working to reduce the equipment and operating supplies budget in order to achieve some savings, and we can talk specifically about what those things are as needed. And then there's this additional contribution to county animal care shelter facility. This is currently outside of our control, but it does represent a massive amount of money that every year comes out of the police department's budget and goes directly over to the animal care shelter facility. Next slide, please. Okay, so I guess that's the end of my slide. I'll just finish kind of by telling you in terms of the impacts, it's important to understand that the police department is, like many departments in the city, already run very much as a bare bones operation. I can tell you when I started with the city 14 years ago, I came in as badge number 40, which means there were 40 police officers in patrol compared to far fewer today. The staffing levels have not increased since the 70s in the police department. So just to put in perspective, when we freeze 4 patrol positions and 8 positions overall, this without question has an impact on operations. Now it is our job to look for new efficiencies and ways to be more effective so that we can continue to deliver the high level of service our community has become accustomed to. And I'm confident we can do that under these measures, or I would not have suggested them in the first place. That being said, this does put us sort of at the threshold of what we can do and still continue to provide the level of service that we want to provide to the community. The 4 frozen positions, represents, because those fall in patrol, that represents nearly 10% of your patrol workforce that is gone tomorrow. The impacts this will probably have right out of the gate is an increase in response times to non-emergency calls for service. It will not increase response times to emergencies. We prioritize those. It will certainly reduce traffic enforcement, as we spoke about losing the motor officer, but also because the more calls that each officer has to handle, the less spare time they have for proactive enforcement. We can expect some reduced proactivity levels. And as I said at the beginning, while that's difficult to quantify, I can assure you it has a very strong impact on the safety of our community. As an example that came through my phone right before I began to speak, just from a traffic stop this afternoon, one of our officers seized almost 11,000 fentanyl pills. And so these are lives saved through a traffic stop and digging and doing the job that police do every day. And the more busy that we are responding to calls, the less time there is for that proactive type of work. Certainly there will be an increase in overtime, although there are many measures that can be taken to mitigate that. There will be difficulty for officers and staff to get the time off that they may need to stay mentally healthy and physically healthy given the demands of this job, because with fewer staff, there's just fewer opportunities to take time off. We will have some challenges in meeting the training requirements of the state and of post. Our training requirements get expanded every single year. The city has done an excellent job of responding to that by continuing to push the training budget year to year so that we can meet those requirements. This year will be difficult under these cuts. Vehicle availability, I think, was already spoken about earlier, but it will hit the police department hardest. We already are 3 years behind in purchasing patrol vehicles. We're getting a couple of them coming through this year, which will be helpful, but a whole year of not being able to replace them, we're kind of rolling the dice with the possibility of crashing cars, which unfortunately police do from time to time, or having vehicles go out just due to age and damage. Beyond that, I think that we're in a pretty good place to maintain the level of services we've become accustomed to. Freezing the dispatch position will hurt a little bit, but to be quite frank, our dispatch has been down as many as 6 positions over the last year. So freezing the one, I think they'll actually be quite pleased with the balance and the ability to work through keeping the department staffed appropriately. And other than that, like I say, just being able to sustain the unknown, how many retirements or injuries or these types of things that are inevitable in our department, we're a little bit less prepared to weather those things under the current budget circumstances. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, and as Michael said, before I start, Chief, thank you for your presentation. You made a statement that the biggest drain, I would say it's not a drain, but a needed necessity, and we appreciate you and the team and what they do. As Michael had said, if we can open it up for questions from my colleagues, but if we can keep it succinct and to the point of the questions that are on our presentation. Any hands? Marty, then Laura.
Yes, Chief Johansson, I want to thank you for your leadership. Your communication to our community is deeply appreciated. And to the whole police force for doing your best to keep San Bruno safe. I definitely want to acknowledge the PSAs and the communication that has come from your department. It's really really appreciated from the community. So thank you for that. Clearly, this is hard on the budget. You covered it well. The police department's doing their part. I'm really concerned about the additional stress, the lack of taking time off that our officers are going to have as a result of this. The consequences of overtime, but you feel confident with this, and it's tough as a council member to hear that that's our option right now. I'm concerned that if there is some officers that either are going to retire or go on leave of some kind, that how quickly can we hire a police officer? Because I understand that takes quite a bit of time. So I wanted to leave you with that, and I'll listen to my colleagues. Thank you.
Any comments, Chief?
That's first of all, Marty, thank you so much for the appreciation and the support and the concern. I can guarantee you it does not fall on deaf ears at the police department at all. But they are prepared to weather this storm. The city has long supported its police department. We return that favor, and I know that the men and women who work at the police department are prepared to do this. This is what we do. That being said, your comments about replacement are a valid concern, but there are contingencies built in. We do have some positions that I think are invaluable to the city and to the police department as a whole, but that are not in patrol, and that worst case scenario, as bad as this thing might get, we have contingencies that we can make sure we will respond to every call for service that comes to the San Bruno Police Department, period. And if that means we need to move personnel around, so be it. But I would not put us in a position where we were literally at our absolute wit's end without making it really clear to y'all that that's where we were at.
Thank you. Laura.
Thank you so much. Chief Johansson, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you so much for your excellent communication. Really appreciate the ongoing public communication, the follow through. You get it, you understand. So question, I guess I would say with all that was said, I had one line item on the budget, which was gas and oil increase from 77 to 115,000. Is that just increase in expected costs? That seemed like a big line item.
Yeah, so we kind of rolled the dice with that projection, right? We based it largely on historical data and the fact that we were tending to go over, and the belief that gas prices rarely go down but continue to go up. But there's no other real factor there. We haven't expanded our fleet or hired a bunch of more cops, nor do we expect to drive a bunch more miles. I think it was just anticipated increases in. And Keith, maybe if you know more than I do on that, you could expand on it.
Nothing else to add, Brian.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my really most important question is, I know we get a lot of comments from residents on complaints regarding parking related issues. And my gut always says, I understand those concerns, but what are the real issues in the police department? What are the real concerns? Because as a council member, I can remember running for city council saying, most important thing for me is our city is safe, is that we are in a city that I can feel confident that I can park my car out front, not get a break-in, feel like I'm not going to get my house robbed, feel like they can walk down the street and be safe. So with these cutbacks and the ongoing things, what are some things, so you mentioned already traffic issues in San Bruno, right? We got a bunch of crazy drivers. We see that even with COVID. It's like, oh, freeways are open, let's drive 100 miles down the freeway. But what are your main concerns, would you say? You know, we heard recently about the fentanyl overdose. I know that in CFD they've been averaging one a week. It's a real thing, and for me, when I hear people complain about traffic things, I say, you know what, those aren't the real concerns. I think we have bigger issues in our city to worry about. Increase in robberies, increase in break-ins, increase of vehicle. I mean, there seems like every day there's a vehicle catalytic converter being broken into. So tell me what you're in the trenches. What are your concerns?
I would agree with you wholeheartedly in that it's as we triage the level of priorities and the things that we want to make sure we're paying our attention to, there are things that come way ahead of parking enforcement. However, I guess I would comment that we are capable of doing both, and we have divided up the department specifically to ensure that we can do all these things, right? The individuals that are core responsible for parking enforcement are not the same people who are out there attempting to pull fentanyl off the street and attempting to make sure that your car is not being broken into. And that's by design. Now, we've struggled a little bit to keep that parking enforcement division staffed, and that's what's kind of created a problem that it is our job to address, plain and simple. And I think we're doing a good job of getting there, but we have a long way still to go. So I think we can prioritize the parking and the quality of life issues and still stay on top of the safety issues. I think that being said, if you're asking the things that are on my radar, you hit one of them right away. The fentanyl epidemic is real. It's very, very real. And it's costing lives every day. And it's exceedingly dangerous for police and fire to be dealing with it. It's completely unprecedented territory, similar to the idea of, this pandemic being something that we have no book that tells us how to handle. We have no book that tells us how to handle this fentanyl epidemic either. And the good thing is that the fentanyl, the catalytic converter thefts, the petty theft, quality of life stuff, the vehicle break-ins, right, when the mall's open, these things all tend to be best addressed through the same measures, which is high visibility, proactive police work. It's that you can rarely drive through your city in San Bruno. If you drive El Camino all the way through the city, I'd be shocked if you don't see a police officer on a traffic stop or a pedestrian stop. This is how we operate. We're very proactive. We do not wait for crime to occur, and we cannot be omnipresent, nor will we ever stop all of it. But this is how you address all of those categorical issues, the thefts and the drugs and the crime and all of those things. And then you've got the crimes that occur behind closed doors that, quite frankly, by nature, we're just going to be responsive to. There's not much to do to break the cycle of domestic violence or other forms of abuse besides respond when it occurs and handle it appropriately. So I very much appreciate your sentiment in understanding that we have to triage, right? It's hard sometimes for the public to understand that we don't always have the choice of just mass deployment to address parking enforcement. We have to ensure that the more serious issues are addressed first, and sometimes they're not quantifiable. The fact that at night you don't want all of your police officers driving around issuing parking tickets is hard to explain, but you don't. You want them looking for that one stop, that one car, that one person who's not where they belong, and to insert themselves into that equation in order to ferret out that criminal activity before it occurs. But all of that said, I am extremely confident that you have set up your police department to deliver on both expectations, and we will continue to strive to do so better and better.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Linda or Michael? Linda, do you have anything? Any questions? Linda?
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Michael?
No questions. Thank you, Ryan. Great presentation.
And the only thing I wanted to say to the team is, which saved time, is I had a concern through my years from crime prevention to council days about the structure, and it's changed. Maybe this is the fourth time of the command staff. Thanks to the chief, he and I had about a 17 minute conversation with my several questions. So I appreciate the answers to save us time here and in listening. And I believe this is the best and approach for succession, as well as dividing up the department for its efficiencies. So once again, Chief, thank you. Appreciate it. And please convey from the council to your team that we know it's been challenging times, and we appreciate them once again stepping up to the plate as they always do. And I've seen them in action, and I know their heart and their spirit is there, and we're with them as well. With that, we'll go ahead and take a 15-minute break. In regards to the study session, looking at the agenda and the time, we still have fire, public works, community, and economic development in regards to the study session. Looking at the agenda and okay, that was odd. I was hearing myself talk, so hopefully it's back live time. Community services. The important thing too is on the other side we have building and facilities. So we need to get through to community services, building and facilities. I want to combine that because we have Joanne here today, and I don't know that she'll be here next week in order to come back since she'll be at a new community. So why don't we go ahead and start with fire, with our fire chief, Ari. Are you ready and available?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you perfect, Chief. Please go ahead.
Great, honorable mayor, members of the council, Ari DeLay, your fire chief here. I'm here just to provide a overview of the fire department's operations, some of our accomplishments, the strategic initiatives, and our proposed budget for the 2021 budget year. Your fire department's composed of 36 FTEs as budgeted. We currently operate out of 2 fire stations, and our core mission obviously is to provide protection of health, life, and property through our emergency response, our fire prevention and education efforts, and our advanced life support program. And those collectively encompass this well-rounded approach to what we do to provide protection to the community. Our fire prevention and public education division is staffed by Chief Slice, and we do currently have an opening in our fire prevention office that we fill with a temporary employee at this time, and we're working to fill that on a permanent basis. When it comes to emergency medical services, our 3 apparatus that the city provides all provide advanced life support or paramedic level service. And we also provide community preparedness through the fire department's efforts, and that's a collective effort. We are a small fire department that's very lean, so that it really involves all aspects of the fire department to collectively work towards that goal. And if we could move to the next slide. Some of the accomplishments, from last year. We held a open house during our National Fire Prevention Week. National Fire Prevention Week is an opportunity for the community and the public to get aware of some of the fire prevention issues that are out there. So that's an all-out effort from our fire prevention division that leads that, but also all of our apparatus that participate in those activities. We implemented some safety initiatives, and along the lines of wellness. Wellness is one of our budget enhancement requests, but we've done some efforts towards that by providing some physical fitness on duty to provide the workforce and the employees the opportunity to stay fit and healthy on duty. We provided our annual CERT training. We typically provide 2 CERT trainings. Things of late have been a little difficult with that in regards to COVID. However, we still have plans to continue that on. And it's a very successful program that we provide for residents to be able to get them trained and educated on emergency response to help the fire department when our resources are depleted in the cities, at our time of need. Those CERT folks are very important to our operation. We've implemented a countywide exposure reduction policy that the county fire departments all participate in this process of exposure reduction. And to us, exposure reduction is to try to reduce the risk of cancer and exposure to some of the carcinogens that our firefighters deal with on a daily basis. There's things that we do at the fire station as far as keeping our gear outside of the living space that we are in, making sure that our apparatus and the exhaust associated with it, keep separate. And then it deals also with our on-scene emergency operations by providing a process in which we operate on structural fires and other type fires where we limit our exposure to the hazard environment by making sure that we're wearing our self-contained breathing apparatus. And then when we're finished with the incident, we actually provide decontamination on scene. We bag our gear, and then we get into a set of reserve gear that the firefighters have available. So that's an important step in collaboration with that wellness program to reduce the risk of exposure to cancer and carcinogens to our firefighters. Next on the list, there's Kincaid Fire Strike Team. Our department participates in the statewide mutual aid system in California. Engine 51 participated at the Kincaid fire, which obviously was a large damaging fire in Sonoma County last year. And we recently received the reimbursement process for that Kincaid fire, and we're seeking that reimbursement as we speak. And if we could move along, next slide. We've provided CPR and AED training to the city staff and some of our residents. That's an annual and ongoing process that our firefighters provide. We have trained CPR instructors within our ranks that provide that training and education to all the city staff as well as the public. This is an important one. From a historical perspective, we completed state mandated inspections. Those state mandated inspections are part of a grand jury investigation in previous years, and we're ensuring that those state mandated inspections are getting accomplished, and we're making sure that the code compliance and building safety inspections are being done as well. Some of the public education initiatives that we continue to provide and did so last year are our bike helmet program. We provide helmets to children that we see on the street, or when there's a request for helmets. If someone is not wearing a helmet or there's a request for one, we'll actually provide a helmet for a child to keep them safe and prevent traumatic brain injuries. We, in collaboration with the American Red Cross, actually provide a smoke alarm program where we'll install smoke detectors in the home. Often we would go out at a week-long program where we work collaboratively with Red Cross and install those smoke detectors. And we participated in reading at the library programs last year as well. The next on the list is our Stop the Bleed program. So we've collaborated with the police department in training them and offering that also to citizens, the Stop the Bleed program. You've probably recently seen a public safety announcement that we've hosted on Facebook that worked collaboratively with the police department on. And that's been a very successful program to stop bleeding in case of any kind of a traumatic injury. And then the big thing on the docket for last year and this year moving forward is our fire mitigation at Crestmore Canyon. Obviously, we have the annual fire mitigation that the fire department, in working with the Parks Department, completes every year. We most recently cleared all the fire roads at Crestmore Canyon. About 1.3 miles of fire roads were cleared as an annual maintenance program. And we're working to provide quite a bit more opportunities, fire mitigation moving forward in Crestmore Canyon. And just recently, we were able to secure some funds to be able to do some curbside chipping in Crestmore Canyon that's going to take place in late June. Part of that whole wildfire assessment is this no harm study. This no harm study is an opportunity to have an outside look at our fire threat within the community, and they've identified our fire risk and threat throughout the community and the target areas that we would want to concentrate when it comes to wildfire risk for our community. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. So some of the strategic initiatives that we want to try to accomplish, pending obviously budget approvals for 2020, 2021, is our firefighter wellness initiative. This is an extremely important program that would attempt to capture early on some of the potential cancer markers and cardiac stress markers that would be associated with a firefighter illness or an injury. Cancer and heart attacks are some of the leading causes of firefighter deaths throughout the nation. And this wellness program is really meant to kind of nip that in the bud and try to identify some of those things early on so we can catch it while it's small and not really get to an advanced stage. So that initiative is to take every firefighter on the suppression side of the fire department's operation, so 35 employees, and provide a screening and wellness check for the firefighters on an annual basis. The next initiative for us is the 2019 fire code adoption. The fire code gets regularly adopted along with the building code, and the fire department's portion of that process is to take the fire code, institute the national fire code, and then any local amendments that we may have for the city of San Bruno. Our portion of that work is done for the fire department, and basically it's waiting to meet your approval in concert with the building code as we move on throughout the year. So we want to enhance our use of social media and the public. We've had a great opportunity to collaborate with the police department, most recently with all these PSAs we've been doing during this COVID-19 period. But enhanced social media is something that I think brings transparency to our organization, allows the public to really truly understand what we do as a fire department and an emergency services organization. So we're looking really to increase that opportunity. Along with other city departments and development we're working towards establishing a 100% digital plan check in our review process. Chief Slice was one of the leaders in that area, along with others in the city, to try to get that process started, to take that process of submission of plans and development stuff and have it run through the pipeline electronically, so we don't have those delays and the process of moving paper and the large amount of documents that are associated with it. We can handle most of that stuff electronically. Records management. Have instituted last year through the budget process, we implemented an electronic records management system called ImageTrend. That allowed us to do our fire reports electronically, and now is allowing us to do our business inspections electronically that we do day to day through fire prevention and also at the engine company level. So the plan is to basically get ourselves to be completely paperless when it goes to an inspection program. That provides us a bunch of different advantages. It allows us to obviously decrease the amount of paper and mistakes that may happen, but also what it allows us to do is to do some better analysis on the things that we're actually capturing out there in the field, and to analyze it and determine where we can make better efficiencies and better operate, to serve our citizens. And let's see here, develop a comprehensive wildfire risk or wildland risk assessment. The no harm study was kind of the first step as a broad brush for the entire city. And we're working to focus on that Crestmore Canyon project to provide a focused wildland risk assessment for that focused area. And so that's going to be where a large concentration of our efforts are going to be this coming year. And I'm pushing a lot of resources towards that effort here. Most recently, again, we've just done that fire road clearance in Crestmore Canyon, about 1.3 miles of road. We have a community chipping program that we just announced that's going up in the mailer today to the residents around Crestmore Canyon. And we're working to secure a project manager to assist us with that Crestmore Canyon project. It's going to be a large, comprehensive project that's going to require, it's not just a maintenance thing, so it's going to require a lot of technical expertise and also, just day-to-day work to manage that project. So we're working on that as well. If we can move to the next slide, please. Great. And the budget numbers are pretty straightforward there. I would say some of the things that we're looking to change budget-wise to help work towards a balanced budget is our some of the initiatives we've taken. I've really looked to basically take a look at every single line item and every program and project that we have and see if there's ways we can actually do it better, create efficiencies while still maintaining the level of service that we currently enjoy. Some of the things that have affected our budget, if you look at the first item there, it's reduced permits and plan check fees. Some of the development items that were in the pipeline that were anticipated revenue to come in to fire departments for plan check fees and those type of items were delayed basically due to projects being pushed off towards this new fiscal year. And then some of the things that we're doing to try to, help balance the budget is the process of holding and freezing 2 firefighter positions and keeping those vacant. We do also have some health and pension increases, obviously, along with other agencies or departments throughout the city that are going to affect the budget. Our wellness and screening enhancement, we've talked about that already. And then we've worked on, talked about working through every line out of the budget. We've reviewed some of the communications expenses. We're trying to contain those costs and actually move those from an outside vendor. We had AT&T for many of the phone lines that were associated with the fire department's operation. And I've worked to move those to CityNet services. And so we actually have a decrease in cost, and we're actually supporting our own city by moving those to CityNet services. So that's a project I've been working on over the last month or two. So we've made some significant progress there. Some other things that we're doing, reducing maintenance costs by performing in-house maintenance. So there's a couple different things that we're doing there. We are reinstituting a shift mechanic process where we have the firefighters do the maintenance and repairs on the apparatus to a certain level. If it gets pretty advanced, we can send those things out. But we have historically spent quite a bit of money out of the fire department's budget on an annual basis to outsource all the maintenance. And there's the dollars that are associated with that maintenance, but there's also the operational capabilities that are decreased by having to pay overtime for people to shuttle risks back and forth, whether it's working with Central County Fire or an outside vendor to move those vehicles back and forth, and the increased labor costs that are associated with it. And if we can move to the next slide, please. I think that's it.
All right, will you talk a little bit about this telephone savings expenses, just as a highlight?
Yeah, so I went through a lot of I'm new. I'm a fresh set of eyes to the fire department, so I want to learn the processes and kind of see what we're up to. So I went through line by line for the budget and went through every single phone line. I determined that we actually had phone lines that were not connected, the physical phones. So I went through that process and determined that those were not necessary. We canceled those. We had other phone lines that were associated with some kind of interesting dedicated AT&T circuits that are long-standing circuits that I think historically by AT&T's process, they charged quite a bit of money. So the emergency phones that sit in front of the fire stations, those phones, if you unwind the bill and can get through all of AT&T's minutia, were $300 a piece for those things to be operated on a monthly basis. So that's a pretty staggering number. These are small potatoes, but it's just, it's like an overall process of looking through everything to make sure we're being as efficient and effective as we can. So what we're doing, we've switched a bunch of lines over to CityNet services. We're taking those emergency phones and taking them off of AT&T dedicated circuits that cost $300 a month and moving them to CityNet services through a VoIP phone line to provide that service at a very, very low cost in comparison. And the result and the end result for us is exactly the same, but we're saving about $1,300 a month in phone lines just through that one process of looking through the phone. So it's been extremely busy, obviously, with COVID-19 these days, but every chance I get, I'm working through the entire process of dollars that are spent through the fire department and see ways that we can create efficiencies and better utilize our dollars that the city has available.
Okay, and not to prolong it, talk about fire inspections and the new non-sworn personnel and how you're ensuring that the mandated inspections occur both for safety and revenue.
Sure. So the non-sworn position. So we are seeking to move we historically have had a firefighter position funded in the fire prevention office, one full-time firefighter position in that office. It's historically been very hard to fill and keep filled. And fire prevention is a tough one because it takes quite a few years to get really good at that job and really learn it well. So what we're moving to do is create a fire inspector position to replace a firefighter position, so we can get kind of a long-term employee there that's really learns the craft and is dedicated to the position. So that's going to be an important piece of what we do. And then, honestly, I've kind of flipped our fire prevention office a little bit upside down with Gage's help. Those legally mandated inspections that the fire departments across the county and the nation really do in the state is those legally mandated inspections are historically done by most fire departments with the fire engines. And, my job as the fire chief is to make sure that we're being compliant with the laws and rules and regulations that pertain to the fire department and affect the city, obviously. So I took those mandated inspections, we flipped it upside down where the engine companies are not doing the mandated inspections, that the fire prevention office is working on the mandated inspections. And a lot of these mandated inspections are actually multifamily residential apartments and things of that nature. So they can be done without actually anybody physically being there from the facility. So we've actually used the opportunity with the COVID-19 stuff that's happening to really hammer those mandated inspections, and we're almost complete for the year. And historically, it's been difficult to get them accomplished even by the end of the fiscal year, never mind this early in the year, and they're almost complete. We're probably 90% of the way there. So those are some of the things that we've been working on within the fire prevention office.
Any more questions for the chief, Javon?
No, sorry.
That's all right. To my colleagues, hands up, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Ari. Great presentation. I was actually going to ask you about the inspections because I guess there are probably close to 500 inspections that the city was doing. And so thank you for that detail and thank you for those questions. But my follow-up question would be to all that, do we have a good follow-up program, right? So we go out and we do an inspection, we find out that there's violations, and then what's the follow-up to make sure that violations are followed through?
Sure. So with that process, we flipped it around again. So fire prevention's going out there. They are much more keen on the process, and really the records management system that we've implemented is really going to be the key to success there. So things don't get kind of lost in the mix, and we have a follow-up process with that. So we do a second and third inspection, and then we can actually go, to potentially find, a business or a facility if they don't comply with those inspections that take place. So our goal is obviously 100% compliance for the legally mandated inspections on an annual basis. And again, that records management system is going to be key to success there.
That's great, because we don't ever want a Oakland fire in San Bruno that existed. And then I guess to Javon, that's an end are awesome on the savings for the telephone, but I guess at one point I would have assumed that everything that the city had was through our CityNet services for the phone system. So is there other phones in our city system that possibly is needing the same revamp?
Being looked into.
And I would say there is, there's a component to that that's a little bit technical. Basically, there's some pieces of the puzzle that we do want redundancy with other providers, like our emergency operations center. We wouldn't want to solely rely on CityNet services, because if we had an outage, we would want to have some redundancy in the EOC to make sure that we can have a continuity of operations with our entire city. So we would want to have some redundancy there, but there's plenty of opportunities, and I'm still working my way through quite a bit of things through the fire department's budget to make sure we can be as effective and efficient as we can. Obviously, the COVID-19 stuff has really, kind of derailed a lot of our efforts, and it's kind of been a baptism by fire, honestly, for me. But it's been great work, and the one thing I would say is that we have a very humble and hardworking workforce in the fire department. They don't complain much, and they are really on board to make it the best fire department it can be. So.
Well, probably a lot of council members don't know this, but San Bruno is probably in the top 5 for the busiest station at 51 in the county. So kudos to getting out there and responding.
Other colleagues have questions or comments? I see many hands. Marty.
Yes. Thank you, Chief, and thank you to our firefighters too. I can tell you from firsthand experience, my neighbor's house burnt down, and it was great to have such a quick response and such. I'm very grateful. So with that said, with this reduction in our staff, when the state calls for, when they likely call for assistance with the wildfires that they've had in the last few years, what's going to happen then?
Good. Strike team. All right.
Strike team. Yes.
Yeah, so we would cover a strike team as long as we could support it with the personnel with overtime, and there's full cost recovery through the state mutual aid process for that. And we've recently worked with the finance department in Keith's shop to update our rate letter with Cal OES. So those things have been implemented to make sure that we're making our city whole for any staff that goes out on these strike team deployments. That's an important piece. And we have the opportunity at the local government level, for the city with our type 1 engine to, if we got in a staffing shortage where things were really tough, that we could actually deny the request. That's not the hope, but that we could get there if it got that bad. But I don't anticipate we would have any of those issues. Just a couple other quick notes that so I don't forget to tell you, we're currently in the process by the end of the week working with the finance department in Keith's shop again. We will have applied for 3 different grants to try to help bring dollars to the city that are out there. So we're working on grants for our radios. We're working on grants for COVID supplies for the future. And then we're also working on a grant for fire prevention to be able to replace the iPads that are on our fire engines to help support that fire prevention effort with our new records management system in fire prevention. Other things, we've been super busy with the EOC. I've been the operations section chief in coordination with Chief Johansson from the police department. Chief Slice has been the planning and intel lead. And, those are important, obviously key roles within the EOC. And then one of the things that I'm particularly proud of our department is we provided non-disposable respirators to all of our employees, the police department's employees, and also some other of the city staff, the code enforcement folks and the building official, to be able to go and continue operating, even despite the COVID-19 stuff, out in the field with these non-disposable respirators. That are basically good for 18 months with the cartridges that are non-disposable. So it's allowed us to continue to operate without using you hear about the shortages of N95 masks throughout the nation. We're using basically with the fire department, PD, and the building official using 0 N95s because these things are disinfectable and non-disposable. So those are a couple of things that we've done.
One more question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, please.
Can you briefly talk about the other open space areas other than Crestmore Canyon and how we're looking at that and how we can notify the residents that live adjacent to it so that people are really informed about what's going on, please?
Sure. I would say, Councilmember Medina, I would say that there's a couple different things. There's the fire prevention efforts that we do kind of day to day. So we have a great focus, obviously, on Crestmore Canyon right now. That's the big focus. But this no harm study has basically identified these hazard areas. I can provide a copy of the no harm study for you guys to be able to take a look at. And that's something we want to get out to the community as well. This recent community chipping program that I said we're announcing today is also going on to the neighborhood around Bennington. So we're going to do chipping around that neighborhood as well. But I need to take a look at an all-inclusive approach to all of our wildfire threat throughout the community and make sure that we're addressing it, appropriately, I would say. And your second part of your question again?
I think it was basically how we can notify our residents of the concerns. Also, not only within the Crestmore Canyon area, but I know some residents have been complaining along the backside of Trenton and on El Camino. I'm sorry, San Bruno Avenue, and just what the plan there is and how we notify the residents of the status of those plans.
So the current plans that we do have are for the Crestmore Canyon as a focus, obviously. And so we've done the recent PSA in regards to that for the citizens. And then, I think we use the opportunities with the social media to get out there and provide some better notification to the residents. And then the other piece, as far as notifications, I don't know if the council is aware yet, but of a large project going throughout the county called Zone Haven, where we provide wildfire communications for evacuations and emergency alerting to the community. It can tie into SMC Alert, which is a standard alerting system that we use, but also we would tie that same evacuation model into what they call WIA and IPAWS, which are two technologies that allow us to rapidly deploy, and it's a non-opt-in system, which is very important. SMC Alert is great, but it has less than 10% opt-in for the communities throughout the Bay Area. That's the kind of the standard. So WIA and IPAWS are kind of the future and the best way for us to get out information out fast without somebody even being involved in signing up for a process. So those are some things I'll be working on here in the near future to best protect our community.
Thank you.
Linda?
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to ask, with police taking over the code enforcement, is there any collaboration happening with the fire department where I know Councilmember Medina just mentioned there was a fire next door to his house, but what is the collaboration if the code enforcement, I guess, becomes aware of a fire hazard or hoarding? Are the two departments going to be working together on that?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I would say absolutely. We just recently served an inspection warrant on a property. That was a fire hazard issue. We had a fire out there on the property itself, and we worked collaboratively with the city attorney's office, the building official, and also the code enforcement folks to be able to abate that hazard. And that's a pretty seamless process, and everybody works together really well. It's great, to see. I'm obviously new to the city, and it's a great collaboration of everybody working together on a day-to-day basis. So.
Great. And just one more question. You mentioned that for radios, you were looking at applying for a grant. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So our portable radios that the firefighter use every day is one of the primary pieces of equipment we use to communicate, obviously, on scenes of incidents. Those radios, ironically, I helped them write a grant back 18 years ago. One of the battalion chiefs that worked here in San Bruno, actually, I gave him my narrative for my grant when I wrote it back then, and that's actually what they got those radios from back there then. So they're 15 years old, and they're basically at the end of useful life, and we're kind of struggling to keep those alive, so to speak. And so we're working on a grant application through the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program, which is a program through FEMA, the Department of Homeland Security, to replace those radios. And that would be a 90-10 split between 90% of the grant would be paid for by the federal government and 10% would be a local match. So we're currently working. We should know within the next month or so if we're successful in that grant. And if not, we're work towards other strategies to get those replaced. But that's a critical part of what we do every day, and those need to get replaced for sure.
And what's the value of those for replacement?
In total, full boat, if we went full tilt, the grant application for about $230,000.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Michael, anything?
No, I just wanted to commend the chief for jumping right in with both feet and getting things done. Got a nice, good handle on the budget, so thank you for taking care of that. The savings on the phone, it's definitely commendable. I was going to ask about the redundancy and keeping a backup, and you addressed that, so you're squared away. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very quickly, Chief, I guess welcome, and you've been welcome to San Bruno in a most unique way with COVID-19, and then I think a couple days on the job being at federal court, representing the city on the PG&E after Judge Alsep had granted us the allocations for the fire mitigation, and also hiking the canyon, seeing the work that's been done for that is amazing and incredible. And of course, and needed to try to bring comfort as well as stability to that area should we need to get back there. So thank you for that. If not, then we're going to move on to Public Works. We're going to move on to Admin, Engineering, and Streets from Director Tan.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, Public Works Director Jimmy Tan. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about Public Works Department. The department is the second largest department in the city. It's made up of various divisions. We have two divisions. We have administration, engineering, and as well as operations and maintenance divisions. And under the O&M divisions, we have water, streets, wastewater, storm, and central garage. There are currently a total of 56 employees in the entire department, and with the proposed transition of building and facilities maintenance to Public Works, the department will have a total of 64 employees. As for administration engineering, what do we do? Well, staff within the department manages and completes CIP projects, issues encroachment permits for work within the public right-of-way, evaluate traffic calming issues, inform review of new development projects. We also support other cities' departments and perform maintenance and operations of our city's facilities to protect the public's health, our community, and the environment. And the division also manages the city's CIP program to ensure that the projects are delivered cost effectively and efficiently, and provides technical and construction supports on the city's projects. Next slide, please. So as noted on the slide, in regards to the accomplishments, during the fiscal year 1920, the department completed design and studies of 8 projects and construction of 14 projects, ranging from replacement of water and sewer pipelines, pump stations, pedestrian improvements, paving and replacement of street signs and streetlight poles. Specific project names are included in the budget document. I don't want to go into too much detail because all the projects are listed in the accomplishments section of the budget document. The city also is very close to completing the emergency work related to the Crestmore Canyon slope stability project. All of the hillside work for the wall construction, along with installation of the new guardrails and replacement of the sidewalk, have been completed. And the only remaining item is the paving work along the westbound lanes of San Bruno Avenue. As for the strategic initiative, the department will continue to replace the critical aging facilities using the work plan that was developed in 2014, starting with the oldest infrastructure east of El Camino. And we have a lot of projects currently under design, which will be brought to the City Council for approval as they're completed. Many of those CIP projects will be discussed during the CIP study session. Next slide, please. In regards to the administration engineering budget, this table shows a comparison of the department's revenue and expenditures from fiscal year 1920 to the proposed 2021 budget. As noted, there is a slight increase in expenditures. There are some adjustments made to reduce professional and personnel services within the budget. The reductions total about $56,000. Most of the increase in expenditures are from internal service allocations, which totaled about $43,000. And then also there's a continuation to support the sea level rise agency. And this agency was recently created by the county with other agencies in the peninsula participating a couple of years ago, and each city was required to provide funding for the first 3 years. San Bruno has allocated $40,000 last year, and we have to do it for the 2 more years. So the budget also proposed a delay of hiring an associate assistant engineer. This will impact the division as we have a lot of projects underway. Department will have to review the work plan and reprioritize the projects to meet the city's goals based on available resources that we have within the department. Next, please. So again, in regards to the streets division, next. The street operations and maintenance divisions perform multiple duties and are called into actions to assist with different aspects of city's needs. The division is responsible for maintenance and repair of city's roadway, responding to residents for illegal dumping in the city's right-of-way, as well as maintaining a clean appearance of the cities for residents and businesses. Some of the work consists of, filling potholing, completing work orders from TSBC, which is the Traffic Safety and Parking Committee, refreshing traffic legends, replacing, faded signs, cleaning sidewalks, and painting red curbs. During the fiscal year 1920, next slide, please. The division completed many tasks. Some of the accomplishments are highlighted, on the slide here, as you see. The first, working together with the engineering division, the street division completed the replacement of 724 street signs, or traffic signs, which was the first priority set of signs that were recommended to be replaced from the overall traffic sign replacement program. And this project was recently accepted by the council. Other accomplishment includes the replacement of streetlight poles, completed work for various work orders for pothole work, red curb painting, signage repair, and thermoplastic installation. One of the strategic initiatives for the division is to provide the city with the highest quality of pavement network. However, many of the roads are old and needs to be repaved, but adequate level of funding is needed. So in the meantime, the street division is continuing to provide maintenance of the city's roadway network to prevent surface damage by performing pothole repairs. And the initiative also includes the continuation of traffic sign replacement program and streetlight poles as well. As for the budget, next slide, please. The street division budget, the proposed division budget hasn't changed too much from the previous fiscal years. There is still there's a slight increase, as you see noted on the slide here. The revenues for the budget are from gas tax Measure M and the proposed Measure G. In order to help with the general fund savings, there were some reductions made to remove some budget under the street lights, traffic signal, and concrete guardrail and fence replacement. There's also an increase of about $60,000 in internal service allocation as well. So, but there are no new proposed budget enhancements within this division. And that's all I have for these two divisions. I can answer any questions that you have.
Jimmy, why don't you keep going? Or did you hit them?
I did. I'm done with my two.
That's right, because everything else is in the enterprise. Okay. To my colleagues, any hands? First Marty, then Linda, please.
That was from before.
Linda?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask what your current needs are. I mean, given the budget that we've been presented, and the likelihood that Measure G some Measure G funds may be diverted to other areas. What else can the council support you with?
Yeah, I think the staff resources are one that we would definitely, like to have increase in staff in the streets division, and possibly maybe even to be able to get the position back in engineering as well for that associate engineer, because we do have a lot of projects in the way, and then having in the future, if these building and facilities projects do come back online, we'll need some support from staff to be able to manage all these projects within the engineering department as well. And as for streets, we do have a need in street staff to be able to go out there and perform, maintenance on a lot of the roadways. But there are only, we have a total of, 5 staff members within the street division, and one, the manager, service manager, that handles, both the streets and storm division. So there's just inadequate amount of staff to be able to do what we need to do. There's a lot of pothole requests, illegal dumping requests that comes through, and the service manager does the best he can to be able to manage every single request that comes through the city, and and he's with the lack of resources that he has, it impacts other things that he needs to do. There's a lot of work orders for other things, record painting, changing out signs, that that has to be delayed, and so. I think staffing is always the biggest need within the within the street division.
Okay, thank you.
If I can expound upon that.
Yeah, please. please, Javon.
We don't have a single engineer that has professional experience with general municipal facilities outside of our public works director, who's also an engineer. So when we look at the engineering capacity that we need within our organization, there's essentially a whole division missing, which is general capital improvement projects that are not utility or road projects. And so when we look at bringing on more engineers, we're really going to look to have someone with that generalist expertise in capital building, maintenance, and management. And Jimmy, I mean, I am correct in that all of our engineers are really street and utility, sewer, water, stormwater engineers, not engineers with a professional skill set in general building maintenance and capital maintenance projects.
You're correct. Yes, and a lot of our engineers have specialties and what they, based on their experience that with other agencies and mostly transportation and utilities, building and facilities projects, management of those are very different from a typical water and sewer replacement project, and not a lot of engineers do have that kind of skill. So I think having someone with that skill set would definitely help the city and the department to be able to complete the projects that we have or we will have in the future for some of these building facilities items.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Any other questions from colleagues? Seeing no hands. So with that, for now, Jimmy, Director Tan, thank you. We're going to move on to Community and Economic Development. Director Smith for Planning and Building.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm Darcy Smith, your Community and Economic Development Director, and I'll be presenting this item on the Community and Economic Development Department, which is comprised of two divisions, the Planning Division and the Building Division. So first I'll cover our priority projects, just to brief you on some of them, which I'm sure you've heard about, because a lot of them align with our strategic initiatives. So first we have the short-term residential rental zoning ordinance, which just went to the Planning Commission and is moving forward to the City Council this summer. We have the user fee study, which you've heard a lot about today, the adoption of the building code updates, the zoning code update, initiation of work on the 2022 housing element, the development of an affordable housing fund implementation plan, and other current development projects, including Mills Park Center and the Bay Hill Specific Plan and YouTube Phase 1 project. These are all projects that the Building and Planning Division staff are working on. Next slide. So even with the COVID-19 emergency, I think because of our great location in the Bay Area where we will probably see less significant effects from the COVID-induced recession, I still predict a strong development project forecast. We have projects moving through the development review process, and while they may have been slowed down slightly, they're still moving forward, and all indications are that they're proceeding. So we have building permits that are under review by the Building Division right now for many large projects, which are generating building permit fee revenue. Those include the YouTube Phase 1, the first part, the garage and foundation, the 901 Cherry Phase 2 project, which is the YouTube building behind their main building at 901 Cherry, the 111 San Bruno Avenue project, which the City Council approved in 2018. And we also have planning applications under review for the Phase 1 project, the Mills Park Center project, and a number of smaller projects. Next slide. So we are anticipating there are other projects on the horizon, and I want to brief you on some conversations that the city manager and I have had with Sears, who has a strong interest in redeveloping their site. As you know, there's a ballot measure proposed for 1000 San Mateo Avenue, the former Sky Park site that will be coming to you in the summer. We also are in discussions with potential developers for the vacant school sites and the other vacant site in the city owned by the city at the Crossings, which has had interest for a hotel development. And in all of these sites, yes, They're moving forward, albeit in a slower fashion, but we are still having many conversations and meetings with these various parties. And I think what this shows is that there's still development interest in San Bruno. Next slide. So we do have some constraints that I want to point out to you. You've heard about many of them before. We have limited capacity for projects above the baseline. When we do take on extra work, like the short-term residential rental zoning ordinance, and we do that in-house, it takes many months. We've been working on that now for almost 6 or 7 months. And we also have limited staff depth in the larger projects. So on really large projects, for example, like the Recreation and Aquatic Center, we do sometimes need to bring in outside contractors to assist us, especially with complex environmental clearance preparation. The director and myself and the planning housing manager and even the building official serve in multiple roles. The building official goes out for inspections. The planning and housing manager sometimes manages planning projects. And you've seen me do a lot of things. Planners always joke in planning school that they really are the jack of all trades, master of none. And I think that's true here, especially we do everything, whether it's preparing a community meeting notice, working on reports, we get involved and do it all. What we're also facing, as you are well aware, is the state. And they keep passing laws, which then we have to respond to. And that involves a lot of changes to our local processes. We've seen a lot of aggressive changes at the state level around housing, including accessory dwelling units. And so we have to react to that by updating our ordinances and our processes. And I'm really proud of the work we've done around ADUs. We've built a new website that's been well received by the community. But anytime the state laws change, we have to respond to those rather quickly. We're also dealing with the economy changing. And while COVID-19 accelerated changes in the economy, we already saw the closure of Sears and Sky Park, and I think we will see more stores closing, and we will have to reimagine those spaces. We will get more pressure, especially given our current complex land use regulations in Ordinance 1284, more pressure to change those to allow sort of reimagining and rezoning of those spaces to allow different uses there. Next slide. So the largest advanced planning project and current planning project that we're working on processing at the same time, a dual process approach, is the Bay Hill Specific Plan and the YouTube Phase 1 project. And that's the office park that is the home to YouTube, Walmart.com, which are our largest employers. And the Bay Hill Specific Plan would allow for the expansion, and that would allow those businesses to maintain their headquarters here and to expand. I want to emphasize that one of the really important features of this plan is transportation demand management measures to reduce trips. And we've worked really closely with those private developers to create enhanced pedestrian realms and also multimodal transportation hubs. There's really good connectivity to BART and Caltrain, but we're always looking for ways to reduce vehicle trips and to sort of solve that last mile traveled. And we have opportunities here to do that. And the Bay Hill Specific Plan also considers a housing overlay where housing would be a permitted use. And that project is proceeding and will come to you this summer for a study session. Next slide. So here are the current renderings for the YouTube Phase 1 project. As I mentioned, that's being evaluated concurrent with the preparation of the specific plan. It was submitted in April 2019 and is still under review. And that's 440,000 square feet of new office space. It's what we would call an infill project because it's on existing surface parking lots. And then they would be adding 3 levels of underground parking compliant with Ordinance 1284. And those would be 3 stories, 50 feet, and include these sort of upgraded pedestrian realm sidewalks that you see here. Next slide. So the other big project that is working its way through the planning process right now is Mills Park Center. We had the community meeting on that last Monday with a turnout of over 100 members of the community. Also built a new community engagement site for this project that's been well received. And this project, as resubmitted in March, includes 2 transit-oriented mixed-use buildings shown here in the rendering with 427 total units, about 8,000 square feet of ground floor space, and that resubmittal is under review and tentatively scheduled to go before the City Council in June. Next slide. So I mentioned previously 111 San Bruno Avenue, which is going through the permit process. That's a 5-story mixed-use building shown here on San Bruno Avenue, and that has 62 multifamily condominium units, about 7,600 square feet of ground floor commercial. And this is a really special building because it's one of the few buildings in town, aside from the crossings, that will have 11 affordable housing units. And those are badly needed in this community. And then we also have 271 El Camino, which is moving through the process and is on the old Lee's Buffet site, a 3-story multifamily project that's going through the process. Next slide. So here you'll see a few other residential projects up in the hills. We have Skyline Residential, which is still moving through construction, and I'm pleased to announce that the model homes are open for virtual tours. So should you want to check those out, you can tour them in the comfort of your home. They are predicting very strong sales. There's still a strong interest, especially in new housing in the peninsula, because it's quite rare. And the community college district will soon start construction on the 30 multifamily rental units. Those are for college faculty and staff, which is a great project, and will include 11 affordable rental units, again, for the faculty and staff. In Glenview Terrace, we've been working on that for a few years now. It's working through the process. Up in the hills, there are some complex environmental issues that we're working through, but that would also include 29 single-family homes. And again, there is demand for that, and we hope those move through the process at the end of this year. Next slide. So I'll step through an overview of the 2 divisions, the building division last and the planning division. The planning division's core business function is development review services, but they're also involved, again, sort of jack of all trades. They're involved in housing. They're involved a lot in economic development and business support. And they're basically involved in any new business that opens in town and most building permits, and also the long-range land use policy and housing policies for the city. Next slide. So we've had a very busy year, and I want to just take a moment and recognize a new employee who's been with us almost a year, the city's planning and housing manager, Pamela Wu. She has done a lot in 1 year and really led that division into sort of a really heavy work period. She's accomplished a lot. The City Council adopted the Downtown Streetscape Plan in October, completed a major overhaul of the parking ordinance in February, and I'm pleased to announce that last week the Planning Commission approved the Recreation Aquatic Center planning approval and certified the EIR, which that was a staff report packet that was almost 1,000 pages. So for any brave soul who read the entire thing front to back, kudos, but I'm really excited that that got approved. And we've also made a lot of progress on the short-term residential rental ordinance. That's going to go back to council this summer, and made a lot of progress on the Bay Hill specific plan and the phase 1 entitlement. Also, I want to recognize the work Ms. Wu did to get grants. I know that's really important to the city, especially at times like this. And Ms. Wu was able to obtain, with council support, the grant for the zoning code update for $160,000. And I commend her for bringing another grant to you in June for $150,000. So that gives us $310,000 of free money from the state. Sort of goes with their housing laws. That will help us fund the zoning code update, which we are outsourcing to a contractor. Staff's very involved, but that $310,000 will save you general fund money. And last, we've been doing a lot of economic development work. So especially right now, I'm on the Chamber Board of Directors, and I work closely with Chamber and the businesses in town, and we're really sort of sometimes the first division that they call when they need help. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of strategic initiatives that we're going to be busy on. The zoning code update, the Bay Hill specific plan. We implement the transit corridor plan, as you heard, with a number of projects. We are sort of the only division that's really heavily engaged in economic development, not through any dedicated staff, but just by myself and the planning housing manager and the planners are being that first point of contact with new businesses and trying to support them through the process as much as possible. We really hope this year to accomplish a lot on the Affordable Housing Fund implementation plan. and the housing element. So I'll just pause there. We're really excited about an intern. We have great, strong candidates who are college students who are right now, really looking for jobs that just evaporated overnight with the COVID-19 emergency. So we're really hoping to get an intern in to really help on this implementation plan. And as the city manager mentioned earlier, we have almost $4 million in that fund. It right now funds some really important programs that I know are city council priorities, such as Life Moves and HIP Housing, their home share program. And but we can do more with that money, but we need to figure out a plan first. That's one of the major things I hope the planning division can make progress on. And the housing element. So as I mentioned earlier, the housing element is kicking off. We're coordinating that with the rest of the cities in the county. And we're really excited to get working on that, but it's going to be a lot of work. And I guess I'll just pause and say that we are looking for other sources of funding. One thing that comes out of building permits is that they pay into what's called the general plan maintenance fund. Right now we only have $12,000 in there, but every permit we issue pays into that fund, and I'm optimistic that there will be money coming into that fund in the next year that can also help pay for the housing element. So when we can be creative with different sources of funding, we are. We really try to stretch every dollar. So next slide. Next slide. So here's our budget slide. You'll see just a small increase in the expenditures. That's primarily related to the housing element and the $12,000 for the intern. But one of the values with the intern is that they're sort of our best way to get an hourly worker in here. The city has limits in place because of PERS and other limits on staff to hire hourly workers, but this would allow us to bring someone in as an intern. We have realigned our permit revenue projections related to COVID-19 just slightly. I mean, we're open for business, we're accepting applications, and we've seen strong interest, but we do think we'll have a little bit of a softening of our revenues. We just want to be cautious, I should say, and not be too optimistic as we were last year. One of the budget balancing plans would result in not filling the vacant limited term assistant planner. That would have implications to service levels. We've tried to have some creative solutions around that, such as the intern. And where possible, we hire a contractor, but they're limited in the work that they can do. And what this means to our community is that it would just take longer to get through the planning process, and there would just be some delays, especially on the work that the assistant planner would do. But a lot of the larger projects, which are handled by more senior staff, would continue to move through the process. Next slide. Well, I'll cover the building division, and I want to just take a moment and pause, next slide, to throw a lot of kudos for our chief building official, Roy Bernald, who is, again, sort of jack of all trades. He does inspections, he works the counter when we have no one show up, and I want to just commend him for being one of the city staff members who has been here every day through the COVID-19. He is one of the staffers whose work is really done at City Hall, and he reopened the building division public service counter May 4th and has just done a lot of great work for the building division. So I'll just pause there. He's responsible for the review and issuance and inspection of building permits for construction on private property. And we've seen increased activity. Property values in San Bruno have risen, and there's just an interest in folks investing in private properties. And he's really critical on all of our major projects too. He's in all the key meetings with the big builders and gets involved. He's also our FEMA floodplain administrator. And as you know, you adopted the FEMA floodplain management ordinance, and with that came a lot of tasks imposed by FEMA. And he's got involved in a lot of those. Next slide. So with COVID-19 and just with sort of the evolution of the world in general, as the fire chief mentioned, we're really trying to go more digital and trying to accept online permit applications. So we're working on that online permitting system, made some progress there. The building division also is the division that accepts the development impact fee. So they've had to respond to that new program and update the collection process. They've also been involved in modifications to San Bruno Responds. to improve the categories, to ensure better complaint tracking and assignment. When there's reporting done, it's really critical to make sure that we're tracking those complaints accurately. So they've done a lot of accomplishments there this year. Next slide. So one of the most notable budget changes here is the reduced permit revenue. So you might remember when we came to you in the second quarter of last fiscal year, we had reduced down those projections, and here we're being conservative too. I anticipate with COVID-19 there will be some delays in projects. As you saw, all construction except for on housing projects was suspended for about 6 weeks during COVID, and there's sort of ripple effects to that. And we do still see a lot of permits moving forward. Our counter is very busy. If you pop into City Hall, you'll see people coming in getting permits. So that continues to be strong, but we are being conservative in our estimates. And then the last thing to mention is the most notable expenditure change here is the transfer of code enforcement to police. But it does help sort of balance out the building division budget where they're able to focus on the key building functions. They're able to sort of better balance their budget from expenditures to revenues and focusing on their core business function, which is generating revenue for the city through issuing permits and then following up with those inspections. So there's also a budget balancing plan that affects building in not filling the vacant limited term technician. And that would also, much like planning, have implications to our customers, potentially longer wait times, and permits could take longer to review and get issued. But one maybe unique thing about our department budget is that those budget balancing plans affect each of the divisions in an equal manner. So I guess sort of some cases appropriate to spread the pain around a little bit, and that's been done with this department. So that concludes my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions along with the department management team, which consists of Roy Bernal, the chief building official, and Pamela Wu, the planning and housing manager. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank Madeline Lopez, the executive assistant here, who contributed many, many hours to assist with the budget preparation. As has been pointed out, there is no analyst here. Many of our executive assistants do multiple jobs. And while it would be great to have an analyst, I think it's more of a citywide benefit. Right now, the highest demand is in planning, and I will say we're fortunate with many of those grants that were obtained that we're able to hire contractors to assist us. They can do that work. There's work they can't do, but we're able to use contractors to assist with some of the advanced planning work, which does reduce the burden on the city staff. So in closing, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Director. Questions from my colleagues? If you could put the hands up. Linda.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about page 155 in our binders, and it refers to number of public engagement activities. I mean, if you could just give us a little bit of overview of what that entails, and is there a cost associated to that?
Sure. So community engagement activities would include the public meetings that we held, such as the Mills Park Community Meeting. You might recall we had a number of meetings on the streetscape plan where we had community engagement, but we also do other forms of community engagement. For example, I'm on the Chamber Board of Directors, so I go to their events and engage with the business community. We sometimes are engaged in other community events. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee has Bike to Work Day, for example, and the Associate Planner Staff Set Committee and I went out to Caltrain and BART, and so those are all just different activities that we do sort of outside of the normal meetings that you mainly see us at.
I really appreciated the notification that went out for the recent Mills Park meeting. I thought it was really clear. It went out, I think it was 1,000 square feet, which was significantly more than what was required. And so I'm just curious to know, can we do that moving forward? And is there a cost associated, obviously, to that as well? Because it is more, it's just an entirely better design than what we had before. So I imagine it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah, so fortunately, when we work on those, the developer pays the full cost of the staff time and the cost of the mailing. I will say it actually, in some sense, saves some money to outsource it because we didn't tie up staff by, running things through the mail machine here, running copies. So the flyer actually alleviated a burden on staff, which was good. We used a vendor. But there was a lot of work that went into preparing the layout. So I'm not sure we can repeat sort of that level of effort, but we are looking into alternative mailings, especially postcards, which members of the community generally find easier to read. You have to open an envelope. So as one of the initiatives next year, we will look at revamping our noticing, making it easier for the community to read the notices and potentially, outsorting the printing, especially for large mailings, so that there's not that burden on city staff and our city resources.
Great, thank you. Might be one later actual notification, that had a big development, and then it clearly had the when the meeting was going to happen, the time. It was all right in front of you. You didn't have to open anything and search for it. So I thought it was a really helpful notice. Thank you for doing that. I wanted to, and then my other question was around just historical buildings. We haven't talked about this, and I don't want to go stray too far, but I did want to ask if I don't know if this is true. I had been told that years ago there was work done around a historical ordinance or preservation of historical buildings, and that it was never finished. And because I know that we're strapped for money, I'm just curious to know if can that be revisited in the form that it may be in, if it's an actual document? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I know that there was a survey done when the city had a redevelopment agency, which was years ago. So we have that. But what I would say is it's really that information that's relevant at the time a building is proposed for demolition. So as we saw with the Recreation and Aquatic Center, we commissioned the study and determined it was historic. And that's a sort of evolving measurement. So what the typical process is that if a building is proposed for demolition, then the city, through the application of the California Environmental Quality Act, requires the developer, in most cases the property owner, to pay for a study that is done by a city hired consultant, and that would evaluate whether the building qualifies as a historic resource. And even if the city had done an inventory 10 years ago, we would still need to require that study because it may be dated. And with CEQA, we always have to do current studies.
Okay. The Historical Association had a town, and I know they have 4 buildings. So I was just curious. And I'm sorry, really last question. Do we have anything that would identify a pattern or a certain look that as we develop our downtown, we end up with some cohesive buildings? I know that when I was on the Planning Commission, one of the points that was made that I thought was well taken was that when the back of Artichoke Joe's was, when we received the plans, it matched the Aperture building so that there was cohesion amongst the beginning and the end of San Mateo Avenue. But I don't believe that there's an actual document that requires it. Am I wrong?
Well, we don't have something like a downtown design guidelines document.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have that per se. We do have the transit corridors plan, which is a specific plan, includes specific development standards and design guideline policies for the downtown area. And in the transit corridor plan, there's different sub areas. So I would say there are downtown specific design policies, not a detailed set of design guidelines. But any project in the downtown that was proposed to change the facade or the outside appearance would go through the architectural review permit process with review by the Architecture Review Committee. And they would review the design and be able to make comments like you referred to with Artichoke Joe's, and through that process. And obviously also engage the public, right? Because it's a public process, a public meeting, public notification. And the architectural review permit findings, which are in the municipal code, do require sort of the evaluation of consistency with the neighborhood. That's a general finding. So if a project came in that was dramatically out of character with the downtown, architectural style, then the city would not support the architecture review permit findings, and the project would be required to make modifications.
Okay.
Thank you. Marty.
Yes, thank you, Director Smith. I wanted to first congratulate you and your staff on the improved notifications for Mills Park. With the website, I've gone on it, and it's a huge improvement. Councilmember Mason already mentioned the expansion to 100 feet for the notification. I think that's wonderful. My observations are that clearly it's been a really busy year, and I want to thank you and your staff for getting us to where we are today. I want to make sure that the council provides the flexible funding needed to continue processing these permits. So I'll leave it with that. I think it's great that we will have an intern, but it's pretty clear to me we need some experienced people to assist with all the heavy loads that you guys are carrying. So I'll leave that comment and be happy to talk among the council and the city manager on how we could provide that flexibility to your department so that we get more done. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Anything else from Laura or Michael?
I don't have any questions, but thank you, Darcy, for the presentation and all the hard work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
All right, and
ditto. I think we get to hear from Darcy a lot, and I really appreciate the hard work. So time-wise, I think we're good.
Yeah, and then Darcy, I just want to circle back, but to Jimmy Tan and his team in Public Works, and obviously that work hand in hand at times across the hall at the counter with the planning and building, and Darcy and your team. It has been a lot that has, whether it's COVID, whether it's the San Bruno slide up at the top, whether it's all the development that's coming in, those extra meetings and those outreaches. And I know we were going to, as a council, determine what to do in future developments. Is it 300, 600, 1,000, but something that was more consistent, and there was continuity to that. But for what you're doing at Mills Park, as was stated, I think the outreach has been good and important for the community. So thank you for all your work. We're going to move on to last but not least. I'm going to say Joanne. This is community service. This will include recreation, parks, senior center, and library. And also, Joanne, like to take on from the internal services funds, the building and facilities. Like to see if you can also include that with this one as well, since I don't know if you'll be there June 4th to update us on that.
No, probably not. Okay, good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. Joanne Magrini, Community Services Director for a couple more days. As this will be the last time I will be presenting to the City Council, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all those that serve this community. It's been my pleasure to work with such a talented and dedicated staff across all city departments. I cannot thank the department head team enough for their support and friendship, and the leadership and support I've received from the city manager. I'd like to sincerely thank the staff in community services. In the wake of a pandemic, they have shown up every day to serve their community, and their dedication is astounding. And finally, to those on the boards, commissions, and the City Council, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service to this community. It has been a privilege to be able to collaborate with you and serve this community that I will always call home. Okay, back to the business at hand. Community services comprised of several different divisions: recreation, library, senior services, parks, and buildings and facilities. Our mission is to provide quality programs, services, and spaces to benefit health and well-being of the community through delivery of recreation, senior and library services, and the maintenance of city parks and facilities. I'm going to take the next few minutes to explain some of the accomplishments and strategic initiatives. So, oh, sorry, can you go back? Sorry. Back one slide, sorry. So the Recreation Department is comprised of 4.95 FTEs. This year we successfully filled the account and customer service representative position. Depending on the time of year, there are about 100 part-time staff employed to support all the programs and services offered. And then the department also supports the Parks and Recreation Commission. Next slide. Some of this year's accomplishments for recreation include setting up auto pay for the After School Adventures program with 71 participants enrolling in this program. This feature is part of the online recreation software that is useful for all of our programs moving forward and streamlining business practices. We also had reached over 4,000 subscribers for our monthly e-newsletter. And during COVID, staff have disseminated important information through this channel to provide resources to the community. Some additional accomplishments due to the COVID-19 pandemic include staff working diligently to continue to offer recreational programming to the community. The recreation website is updated bi-weekly with new content for the virtual recreation site. In addition, staff is working to find ways to offer extended summer programming, including art, science, and sports programming in a virtual camp setting. The staff also continues to communicate with the community regarding closures of facilities, picnic areas, ball fields, coordinating credits or refunds to the residents on an ongoing basis based on the San Mateo County Health Order updates. Some of the strategic initiatives for the upcoming year include moving into the next phase of the RAC project with finalization of construction documents. Staff will also continue to work to secure temporary facilities to continue programs and services during construction. In conjunction with the RAC construction project, the Reflections Memorial Sculpture is proposed to be relocated near the tennis courts in San Bruno City Park. The relocation will happen prior to demolition of the Recreation Center. The proposal was approved this month by the Culture and Arts Commission to be funded by the City Art Fund and will next be going to the Park and Rec Commission as well as City Council. During this time of COVID and construction, staff will work strategically to reevaluate all special events, especially the large-scale ones, to bring the most cost-effective and well-attended events to the community. Next slide. Just a quick rundown of the Rec and Aquatic Center project and how it came to be. It all began with the PG&E gas pipeline explosion back in 2010. Part of the restitution included rebuilding the Crestmore neighborhood. San Bruno Community Foundation was formed and allocated $50 million to build a new Rec and Aquatic Center for the community. The conceptual and schematic designs were completed. We're currently at 90% construction documents, with construction expected to begin in early 2021. The staff continues to work with many different stakeholders to complete construction documents. There have been multiple internal steering committee meetings with Group 4 architects, their team of consultants, Griffin Structures, and our project management team in regard to the design and construction of the new facility and other aspects of the project, such as improving the creek and expanding city parking. Staff have also worked with consultants to complete the environmental impact review, report and CEQA documents, and as Darcy mentioned, the Planning Commission adopted and certified the EIR a couple weeks ago. Next slide. Notable changes to the budget include a decrease in both revenues and expenditures due to the pending construction project, as well as the assumption that the majority of all in-person programming will not begin again until the fall due to COVID restrictions at the earliest. Reductions are also reflected in the line items for part-time staff and supplies eliminated after school program in the fall, as well as camp and aquatics programs closing this summer, not happening this summer. Staff will continue to research locations to offer programs and service to ensure the community experiences very little disruption during construction time of the new facility. Revenue projections have also been reduced for picnic areas, the gym, and meeting room rentals. One more notable reduction is that of the printing and binding line item. Due to COVID, the summer and fall activity guides will not be printed or distributed. Staff is researching cost-effective ways to advertise programs and services that will be offered during this time, as well as once the city reopens. Staff will utilize the Civic Rec platform that was implemented in 2018, among other electronic and social media outreach. If this proves to be successful, the funding reduction will be a significant savings. Right now, it's $12,000 to not do the summer and fall activity guide. Moving on to parks. So the parks, which also supports the Park and Recreation Commission, also supports community beautification events. There are 14, next slide. There are 14.85 full-time positions, 1 field supervisor, 3 lead workers, 9 maintenance workers, and 1 maintenance technician tree worker. We currently have 1 of the lead positions vacant, and this is the position we're proposing for the reclassification for the parks manager position. They are collectively responsible for 98 acres of landscape at 18 parks, 3 school sites, over 7 linear miles of medians, and the landscape areas that surround our city buildings. Staff coordinate with the fire department on fire mitigation strategies in the 128 acres of open space in the city, as well as work in partnership with Public Works in responding to downed trees during storms. The tree crew consists of 2 staff members that are responsible for the care of 6,700 city trees. Their duties include pruning, pollarding, and removals and watering of these trees, with the exception of the routine grid pruning, which is done by West Coast arborists annually in the winter. In the past 10 months, tree crew has responded to 133 Acela-related inquiries, and that's on our SB response. Next slide. This past year, staff have overseen the first year of the ADA transition plan, which included installation of playground fiber and replacement of entry gates at parks. They've supported the Florida Park Avenue Park final design and collaborative process from schematic design to construction documents of the new Rec and Aquatic Center. In collaboration with Public Works, the department oversaw 1-year maintenance agreement for the recently landscaped medians on San Bruno Avenue. The maintenance responsibility was taken over by the Parks Department in March of this year. Staff have also coordinated the private residents for the planting of 157 trees through the Circle 3.0 grant program, which allowed residents to sign up to receive a free tree for their property. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Parks Department has played an important role. They've been responsible for the closing of the following park amenities: playgrounds, public restrooms, drinking fountains, picnic sites, tennis courts, basketball courts, and the dog park. They check signage on a daily basis to make sure that it is all still present and visible. Staff are also educating the public on the current county order. They provide support to the senior center lunch delivery program by providing at least 1 person to help with driving for deliveries daily. Strategic initiatives for the Parks Department for this coming year are the Tom Lara Field grandstand renovations, which includes new bleachers, doors, windows, and waterproofing of the structure, the completion of the city's tree inventory, and Florida Avenue Park irrigation installation. Next slide. Notable changes to the budget include reclassifying the vacant lead maintenance worker position to the park service manager, which will be an enhancement request, which we've already discussed, health and pension increases, and operating expense reductions, along with removal of the one-time wildfire mitigation enhancement from the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. Just to review again quickly, the Parks Services Manager will supervise line staff and projects, provide administrative oversight and coordination, assure timely delivery of parks capital improvement projects, and proactively address the department's needs. The role of this manager is currently spread across the supervisor and community services director and increases many of their responsibilities. The parks manager position is necessary to relieve the extra workload and allow staff to perform at optimal levels to support and assure credible delivery of routine and continuous service levels. Senior Center. Next slide. The Senior Center is comprised of 3.9 full-time staff, 10 part-time staff, and over 150 volunteers. This year, we were successful in filling the food coordinator position with a professional chef who has elevated the daily lunch program. This department supports a senior advisory board. This year, Senior Services included a daily lunch program that served over 21,000, hosted 13 special events, and offered 10 trips. Over 5,000 participants monthly attend a wide range of fitness activities, educational, and enrichment classes. I must say that I'm quite impressed with the number and the quality of programs and services the city provides to the senior population, with an annual attendance of over 73,000. It is well known and highly regarded by the seniors up and down the peninsula. Next slide. New performances, safety demonstrations, and educational seminars continue to be offered and have helped to increase attendance and participation in the daily lunch program. This year, staff coordinated with Mills Peninsula Senior Focus to provide comprehensive health screenings. Other notable offerings were stretching and meditation, spouse and partner law support group, food smart cooking workshop, an increase in pickleball and mahjong games, and an event honoring veterans on Veterans Day. A new billiard table was purchased, and the second one was repaired, resulting in a very happy bunch of daily billiard players. When the city was faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, the senior staff began a meal delivery program. Meals are delivered to the San Bruno residents who are in need of a hot and nutritious meal each day, Monday through Friday. At its peak, staff were delivering over 100 meals around San Bruno. As part of phase 2 of the shelter-in-place order, a grab-and-go program began for seniors who have the ability to pick up lunch from the center. All protocols are being followed, including plexiglass barrier, marking 6 feet apart when in line, face masks being worn by both staff and seniors. This program has been very popular and successful. The staff prepping, cooking, and delivering the meals are dedicated to serving the seniors in the San Bruno community. I've received a lot of positive feedback from the seniors, and they're extremely grateful for this service. Lastly, not on this list, but important to note, the senior library was designated as an 11-day voting site for the November election. It was reported that this location was the highest attended voting site in the county. It is planned to be a voting site this coming November election. Some of the strategic initiatives for the Senior Center this year are comprised of introducing new classes, including seated yoga for participants with mobility challenges. Staff will move into the second year recommended ADA transition plan improvements, additional renovations in collaboration with community development, public works, and facilities departments to include enhancements to the parking lot and the construction of the new trash enclosure and installation of safety bollards. Other planned work includes the upgrade of the electrical in the craft room in order to install a repurposed kiln from the rec center for their popular ceramics program. Next slide. Notable changes to the budget include aligning revenue from the contract classes with the operating expenses to pay Senior Center contract instructors through the same process the rec contract instructors are paid. In addition, the budget includes a decrease in both revenues and expenditures due to the assumption that many in-person programming will not again begin at least until the fall, maybe January due to COVID. The lunch program will continue the grab and go and delivery system. Other significant budgetary changes include a reduction in the facility rental revenue. Moving on to library. So, is anybody tired of me yet? Just me. The library is comprised of 7.8 full-time and 13 part-time staff. The division supports the Culture and Arts Commission, and the services include access to ebooks, the homework center, video streaming services, seasonal reading programs, and 400 special programs annually. Next slide. Prior to the pandemic, the library achieved many accomplishments. These include a $47,000 grant to replace 41 public use computers and offer 8 public computer instruction classes. In support of the Culture and Arts Commission, library delivered movies in the park, Shakespeare in the park, art in the library, as well as the installation of art on 3 traffic controller boxes in various locations around town, with 3 more to be completed in the coming months. The library provided 114 public programs in support of its annual summer reading initiative, which aims to prevent children from suffering reading achievement loss over the summer months. These programs were attended by 5,872 people for an average of 50 people per program. In addition to the summer reading program, the library also received a grant to provide library services outreach to children attending the Big Lift summer program. 550 children were served through this grant. The library began issuing instant digital library cards this fiscal year. Instant digital library cards allow users to immediately begin checking out ebooks before physically visiting the library. By the end of January, the library had issued 199 such cards. Library visits continue to increase this fiscal year prior to March. During the July to January time period, the library visits increased 11% over the previous year and 26.8% from the same period 3 years ago. Despite the library facility closing to the public after March 14th, the library welcomed 161,000 visitors this fiscal year. The library's been offering twice weekly live streaming story times since April 9th. These story times have been viewed by an average of 50 households per session. In addition, they have received many notes of thanks from its patrons for providing this service while the building is closed. In addition to the live streaming story times, library staff are keeping busy with a number of other projects. They have given away over 800 books at the San Bruno Park School District drive-through program. These books were provided with funds from Measure K and the Samet Foundation. They've been providing 3 staff members every Monday through Friday to support the Senior Center lunch delivery program. They're pleased to assist with the community seniors in their need for this current shelter in place. The library began offering curbside service on May 21st. I'm pleased to inform you that San Bruno was the first library in San Mateo County to offer this service. The service was initially being offered to residents who have holds pending since the library closed. We anticipate the curbside service will be open to all residents beginning June 1st. The library's strategic initiatives this year include the installation of upgraded network wiring to increase the speed of the library's public computers and Wi-Fi network by up to 150%. The library's existing public network wiring is over 20 years old and is outdated. Another strategic initiative is to introduce the customized library service, which involves receiving new books that are fully processed and shelf ready. These will result in less need for processing new books in-house and therefore will lower operating costs. Next slide. Notable changes in service level challenges include overdue fines not being assessed for hold materials arriving from libraries that do not charge overdue fines, as well as the depletion of the state funds from interlibrary loan transfer. In addition, the reduction of part-time staff and other operating budget reductions, such as new book purchases, will affect the library's operations this fiscal year. Keith, I don't know if you're ready to move on to the buildings portion, but I can either stop or continue on.
I'll move forward to that section. Just give me one moment.
You got it.
Oh, here we are. That's on our presentation slide, what, 147 of 161 that was emailed to the council.
Okay, do you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. The Buildings and Facilities Division is made up of 8.85 full-time staff. There's 1 field supervisor for this division overseeing 1 lead and 4 custodians responsible for cleaning 12 city facilities, several of which are used heavily on a daily basis by its residents, and 1.5 facility maintenance technicians responsible for the maintenance of 17 city facilities and have responded to over 1,300 work orders this past year. Facility staff are also responsible for managing CIP projects and implementation of the ADA transition plan. Next slide. Buildings and Facilities works closely and collaborates across departments within the city. This year, staff completed year 1 of the ADA transition plan. A contract was secured for quarterly and annual inspection and maintenance for our fire sprinklers. The HVAC system housed in the server room at the police department failed and was leaking, jeopardizing data equipment that supports our public safety entity, as Javon had mentioned earlier today. Staff were able to stabilize the situation until a new unit could be ordered and installed. Some of the strategic initiatives that Buildings and Facilities staff will implement this coming fiscal year is implementation of year 2 ADA compliance at all city facilities. And then some of the accessibility issues that will be addressed in year 2, some of the accessibility issues that will be addressed in year 2 include installation of door kick plates, replacing door hardware, adjusting door closures, and the addition of necessary signage. The police department is in need of several major repairs. The sewer line that backed up in the basement of the facility last year needs to be replaced. The HVAC boxcar unit is failing and the roof needs to be repaired. The leaks in the facility have caused major damage to the carpet, baseboard, walls, and ceiling tiles. There are also several projects that need to be addressed at the senior center, including enhancements to the parking lot and trash enclosure. And then with the use of the Measure K funds, facilities will coordinate with park staff to oversee and manage the renovations to the Tom Lara Grandstand facility. Next slide. Notable changes to the budget include additional funds to address emergency repairs to facilities such as roof repairs and HVAC maintenance, as well as additional funds for equipment and fixtures. During COVID, it is important to note the flexibility of the custodial staff. They made several adjustments over the past few months of the shelter-in-place order to preserve cleaning products and increase cleanings at bathrooms, break rooms, and common areas. The facility staff have also installed plexiglass at all public counters to help minimize the spread of COVID between the public and the city staff that serve them. Most importantly to note, beginning July 1st, the Buildings and Facilities Department will begin to report to the Public Works Division. In addition to this reorganization, there is a staff position reclassification for the Facilities and Garage Services Manager. I am happy to answer any and all questions.
Well, thank you. Take some water or take a breath, and let's everyone raise hands who'd like to ask questions. First one is Linda. Oh, sorry. Anybody who has questions, if you could raise your hand for Joanne. I'm seeing none from council. Linda.
Okay, then I'll go. I just wanted to, did you say 161,000 residents went through the library? What was the 161,000 number again?
Yes, welcomed 161,000 visitors this fiscal year.
Yeah, so I just want to refer back to Jovan's very first slide around, where you budget is what you value. And that says a lot in a community of about 45,000 people. So, I think that it's at capacity, but it's like this little but mighty library here in San Bruno that keeps chugging away. And with that said, I just also wanted to thank you, Joanne. I know this is your last meeting. So I just want to thank you for everything you've done in San Bruno and wish you the best in your next endeavor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Marty.
Yes, Joanne, I just wanted to thank you too. Leaving a city that you love for a short time till whenever, it's tough. I left San Bruno for 6 years, and just wanted to thank you for everything you're doing, everything you've done, and your staff. It's a big transition year for San Bruno as we're adjusting to our budget and all the challenges, and just thank you and best wishes.
Thank you.
Laura.
Thank you. Joanne, I was overwhelmed by your presentation because there's so much on your plate. And I know that the city manager, I think even Connie, tried to get the position added. And, it's always tough when you're struggling with a budget. How do you add that additional person to help with that? But, really, the reality of it is that I don't even know how you keep it all. I'm just thinking of like your daily day. And, during the storms, there's these crises. But during the summertime, there's these crises. And your head's on just pivoting with so many jobs and responsibilities. So kudos for staying in it for so long. And I'm clearly, it's too much for one person, and we've got to figure out how to be more successful in being able to offer services that we actually can cover our costs. There's so many great things that have happened in the last few years, and thank you for your insight on the REC. That has been a passionate project, and I'm sure you're someone who has liked to see the progress that we've made on that, and there's been a lot for that. And so I appreciate your expertise there, and don't be afraid to really share honest feedback in the direction that we're going and if we're making the right choices. Because my concern will always be, how do we sustain this new building going forward when we are facing financial budgetary issues? So that's always going to be a big concern. I don't have any constructive criticism. I think I just want to say thank you so much for everything you've done and been part of. And that I know that you're not alone, and you've got an amazing staff that supports you behind that. And so thank you for you and your staff for everything everybody's done.
Thank you.
Michael? Michael? Did I lose him? Okay. Joanne, I think you just came back. Michael?
No, so I didn't have any questions, but I did want to thank Joanne for her service and for everything. It was great having you on the team, and so thanks for everything. It was a good report, and I think you're leaving us in a good place. So thank you.
Thanks.
And then finally, just for me, I already said my thoughts last evening, but to reiterate, it's unprecedented. You know, who would have thought you being in front of the rec, sitting on what's not there anymore, those bricks, at the end of summer playground, that you'd be sitting in that office. And I know that you sense and have this feeling that it's hard to transition, but at the same time, I know that you're available. I know that you'll be there if the phone rings to offer an opinion. You've never been shy on offering an opinion. And we do appreciate that everything that the team has done at all levels, at all your divisions, because it hasn't been easy. And this is a unique transition that an employee never thinks will have to face, and hopefully will have to face it again. And in closing, be assured, your mother is very proud of you. Very proud.
Thank you.
City Manager. I think we're good. This has been a very, very rich discussion, and thank you all. Thank you to council. Thank you to all the department heads. We did not get through our enterprise and our internal service funds, but frankly, I think the discussion was really worthwhile that we had today. So we'll plan to have that on the 9th and potentially on the 4th as we work with that agenda. We're looking at the timing on the 4th, and Rico, I know you articulated earlier that you had a conflict, and so potentially starting that meeting at 6:30 on June 4th is totally possible. So if all of council concurs, we will make that change. And lastly, Joanne, I've said it to you a number of times privately and in email, but thank you for everything that you've done. You'll be missed. You've been an amazing partner for everything that we've done here. I know your staff in the Community Services Department will miss you, and on the department head team, you will certainly be missed, and your can-do spirit won't be there, and we'll be sad. Eagles sometimes leave their perch and find a new one, and that is what you're doing, and I know you will have an amazing time in Cupertino and leading their Parks and Rec department. So wish you the best. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
And thank you again, Joanne. And with that, folks, we are going to go ahead and adjourn, and the next regular city council meeting will be held on June 9th at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much for your day. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the team. Take care.